Book 9. No more of talk where God or angel guessed with man, as with his friend familiarust. To sit indulgent and with him partake rural repast, permitting him the while venial discourse unblamed. I now must change those notes to tragic, foul distrust, and breach disloyal on the part of man, revolt, and disobedience on the part of heaven, now alienated, distance and distaste, anger and just rebuke, and judgment given, that brought into this world a world of woe, sin and her shadow, death, and misery, death's harbinger, sad task, yet argument not less but more heroic than the wrath of stern Achilles, on his foe pursued, thrice fugitive about Troy wall, or rage of Turnus for Lavinia disespoused, or Neptune's ire, or Juno's that so long perplexed the Greek, and Cytherea's son. If answerable style I can obtain of my celestial patroness, who deigns her nightly visitation unimplored, and dictates to me slumbering, or inspires easy my unpremeditated verse. Since first this subject from heroic song pleased me long choosing, and beginning late, not sedulous, by nature to indite wars, hitherto the only argument heroic deemed chief mastery, to dissect with long and tedious havoc fabled knights, in battles feigned, the better fortitude of patience and heroic martyrdom unsung, or to describe races and games, or tilting furniture, emblazoned shields, impresses quaint, caparisons and steeds, bases and tinsel trappings, gorgeous knights, and joust and tournament, then marshalled feast, served up in hall with sewers and seneschals, the skill of artifice or office mean. Not that which justly gives heroic name to person or to poem, me, of these, nor skilled nor studious, higher argument remains, sufficient of itself to raise that name, unless an age too late or cold, climate, or years, damp my intended wing, depressed, and much they may, if all be mine, not hers, who brings it nightly to my ear. The sun was sunk, and after him the star of Hesperus, whose office is to bring twilight upon the earth, short arbiter, twixt day and night, and now from end to end, night's hemisphere had veiled the horizon round. When Satan, who late fled before the threats of Gabriel out of Eden, now improved in meditated fraud and malice, bent on man's destruction, maugre what might hap of heavier on himself, fearless returned by night he fled, and at midnight returned from compassing the earth, cautious of day, since Uriel, regent of the sun, descried his entrance, and forewarned the cherubim that kept their watch, thence full of anguish driven. The space of 7 continued nights he rode with darkness, thrice the equinoctial line he circled, 4 times crossed the car of night, from pole to pole, traversing each colour. On the 8th returned, and on the coast of earth from entrance or cherubic watch, by stealth found unsuspected way. There was a place not now, though sin not time first wrought the change, where Tigris, at the foot of paradise, into a gulf shot underground, till part rose up a fountain by the tree of life. In with the river sunk, and with it rose Satan, involved in rising mist, then sought where to lie hid. Sea he had searched and land, from Eden over Pontus, and the pool, Maeotis, up beyond the river Rob, downward as far Antarctic, and in length west from Orontes to the ocean bared at Darien, thence to the land where flows Ganges and Indus. Thus the orb he roamed with narrow search, and with inspection deep, considered every creature which, of all, most opportune might serve his wiles, and found the serpent subtlest beast of all the field. Him, after long debate, irresolute of thoughts revolved, his final sentence chose fit vessel, fittest imp of fraud, in whom to enter, and his dark suggestions hide from sharpest sight, for in the wily snake, whatever slates, none would suspicious mark, as from his wit and native subtlety proceeding, which in other beasts observed, doubt might beget of diabolic power, active within, beyond the sense of brute. Thus he resolved, but first from inward grief his bursting passion into plaints thus poured. More justly, seats worthier of gods as built with second thoughts, reforming what was old. O earth, how like to heaven, if not preferred for what God, after better, worse would build. Terrestrial heaven, danced round by other heavens that shine, yet bear their brief officious lamps, light above light, for thee alone as seems in thee concentrating all their precious beams of sacred influence. As God in heaven is centre, yet extends to all, so thou, centering, receivest from all those orbs in thee, not in themselves, all their known virtue appears productive in herb, plant, and nobler birth of creatures animate, with gradual life, of growth, sense, reason, all summed up in man. With what delight could I have walked thee round, if I could joy in aught, sweet interchange of hill and valley, rivers, woods and plains, now land, now sea, and shores with forest crowned, rocks, dens and caves. But I in none of these find place or refuge, and the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I feel torment within me. As from the hateful siege of contraries, all good to me becomes bane, and in heaven much worse would be my state. But neither here seek I, no nor in heaven to dwell, unless by mastering heaven supreme, nor hope to be myself less miserable by what I seek, but others to make such as I, though thereby worse to me redound. For only in destroying I find ease, to my relentless thoughts, and him destroyed or won to what may work his utter loss. For whom all this was made, all this will soon follow, as to him linked in weal or woe. In woe then, that destruction wide may range, to me shall be the glory sole among the infernal powers, in one day to have marred what he, Almighty styled, 6 nights and days, continued making, and who knows how long before had been contriving, though perhaps not longer than since I, in one night, freed from servitude inglorious, well nigh half the angelic name, and thinner left the throng of his adorers. He to be avenged, and to repair his numbers thus impaired, whether such virtue spent of old now failed more angels to create, if they at least are his created, or, to spite us more, determined to advance into our room, a creature formed on earth, and him endow, exalted from so base original, with heavenly spoils, our spoils. What he decreed he effected, man he made, and for him built magnificent this world, and earth his seat, him Lord pronounced, and oh indignity, subjected to his service angel wings, and flaming ministries to watch and tend their earthly charge. Of these the vigilance I dread, and to elude, thus wrapped in mist of midnight vapour glide obscure, and pry in every bush and brake, where hap may find the serpent sleeping, in whose mazy folds to hide me, and the dark intent I bring. O foul descent, that I, who erst contended with gods to sit the highest, am now constrained into a beast, and mixed with bestial slime, this essence to incarnate and imbrute, that to the height of deity aspired. But what will not ambition and revenge descend to? Who aspires must down as low as high he soared, obnoxious, first or last, to basest things. Revenge at first, though sweet, bitter ere long, back on itself recoils. Let it, I reck not, so it light well aimed, since higher I fall short, on him who next provokes my envy, this new favourite of heaven, this man of clay, son of despite, whom us the more to spite his maker raised from dust. Spite then with spite is best repaid. So saying, through each thicket dank or dry, like a black mist low creeping, he held on his midnight search, where soonest he might find the serpent. Him fast sleeping soon he found in labyrinth of many a round self-rolled, his head the midst well stored with subtle wiles, not yet in horrid shade or dismal den, nor nocent yet, but on the grassy herb, fearless unfeared he slept, in at his mouth the devil entered, and his brutal sense, in heart or head possessing, soon inspired with act intelligential, but his sleep disturbed not, waiting close the approach of morn. When a sacred light began to dawn in Eden on the humid flowers that breathed their morning incense, when all things that breathe from the earth's great altar send up silent praise to the Creator, and his nostrils fill with grateful smell, forth came the human pair, and joined their vocal worship to the choir of creatures' wanting voice. That done, partake the season prime for sweeted scents and airs, then commune how that day they best may ply their growing work, for much their work outgrew the hands' dispatch of two gardening so wide. And Eve first to her husband thus began. Adam, well may we labour still to dress this garden, still to tend plant, herb, and flower, our pleasant task enjoined. But till more hands aid us, the work under our labour grows, luxurious by restraint. What we by day lop overgrown, or prune, or prop, or bind, one night or two with wanton growth derides tending to wild. Thou therefore now advise, or hear what to my mind first thoughts present. Let us divide our labours, thou, where choice leads thee, or where most needs, whether to wind the woodbine round this arbour, or direct the clasping ivy where to climb, while I, in yonder spring of roses intermixed with myrtle, find what to redress till noon. For, while so near each other thus all day our task we choose, what wonder if so near looks intervene and smiles, or object new casual discourse draw on, which intermits our day's work, brought to little, thou begun early, and the hour of supper comes unearned. To whom mild answer Adam thus returned. Soul Eve, associate soul, to me beyond compare above all, living creatures dear, well hast thou motioned, well thy thoughts employed, how we might best fulfill the work which here God hath assigned us, nor of me shalt pass unpraised, for nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good, and good works in her husband to promote. Yet not so strictly hath our Lord imposed labour as to debar us when we need refreshment, whether food or talk between. Food of the mind, or this sweet intercourse of looks and smiles, for smiles from reason flow, to brute denied, and are of love the food, love not the lowest end of human life. For not to irksome toil, but to delight, he made us, and delight to reason joined. These paths and bowers doubt not, but our joint hands will keep from wilderness with ease as wide as we need walk, till younger hands ere long assist us. But if much converse perhaps thee satiate, to short absence I could yield, for solitude sometimes is best society. And short retirement urges sweet return, but other doubt possesses me, lest harm befall thee, severed from me. For thou knowest what hath been warned us, what malicious foe envying our happiness, and of his own despairing, seeks to work us woe and shame, by sly assault, and somewhere nigh at hand, watches, no doubt, with greedy hope to find his wish and best advantage, us asunder. Hopeless to circumvent us joined, where each to other speedy aid might lend at need, whether his first design be to withdraw our fealty from God or to disturb conjugal love, than which perhaps no bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more, or this, leave not the faithful side that gave thee being, still shades thee and protects. The wife, where danger or dishonour lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her, or with her the worst endures, to whom the virgin majesty of Eve, as one who loves and some unkindness meets, with sweet austere composure thus replied: Offspring of heaven and earth and all earth's lord, that such an enemy we have who seeks our ruin, both by thee informed, I learn, and from the parting angel overheard, as in a shady nook I stood behind, just then returned at shut of evening flowers. But that thou shouldst my firmness therefore doubt to God or thee, because we have a foe may tempt it, I expected not to hear. His violence thou fearest not, being such as we, not capable of death or pain, can either not receive or can repel. His fraud is then thy fear, which plain infers thy equal fear, that my firm faith and love can by his fraud be shaken or seduced. Thoughts, which how found they harbour in thy breast, Adam misthought of her, to thee so dear. To whom with healing words Adam replied, Daughter of God and man, immortal Eve, for such thou art from sin and blame entire, not diffident of thee do I dissuade thy absence from my sight, but to avoid the attempt itself, intended by our foe. For he who tempts, though in vain, at least asperses the tempted with dishonour foul, supposed not incorruptible of faith, not proof against temptation, thou thyself with scorn and anger wouldst resent the offered wrong, though ineffectual found, misdeem not then, if such affront I labour to avert from thee alone, which on us both at once the enemy, though bold, will hardly dare, or daring, first on me the assault shall light. Nor thou his malice and false guile contemn. Subtle he needs must be, who could seduce angels, nor think superfluous others aid. I, from the influence of thy looks, receive access in every virtue, in thy sight more wise, more watchful, stronger, if need were of outward strength, while shame, thou looking on, shame to be overcome or overreached, would utmost vigour raise, and raised unite. Why shouldst not thou, like sense, within thee feel when I am present, and thy trial choose with me, best witness of thy virtue tried? So spake domestic Adam in his care, and matrimonial love, but Eve, who thought less attributed to her faith sincere, thus her reply with accent sweet renewed: If this be our condition, thus to dwell in narrow circuit strained by a foe, subtle or violent, we not endured, single with like defence, wherever met, how are we happy, still in fear of harm? But harm precedes not sin, only our foe, tempting affronts us with his foul esteem of our integrity. His foul esteem sticks no dishonour on our front, but turns foul on himself. Then wherefore shunned or feared by us? Who rather double on again from his surmise proved false, and find peace within, favour from heaven, our witness from the event. And what is faith, love, virtue, unassayed alone, without exterior help sustained? Let us not then suspect our happy state, left so imperfect by the Maker wise, as not secure to single or combined. Frail is our happiness, if this be so, and Eden were no Eden, thus exposed. To whom thus Adam fervently replied, O woman, best are all things as the will of God ordained them, his creating hand, nothing imperfect or deficient left of all that he created, much less man, or aught that might his happy state secure from outward force. Within himself the danger lies, yet lies within his power. Against his will he can receive no harm. But God left free the will, for what obeys reason is free, and reason he made right. But bid her well beware, and still erect, lest by some fair appearing good surprised, she dictate false, and misinform the will, to do what God expressly hath forbid. Not then mistrust, but tender love enjoins, that I should mind thee oft, and mind thou me. Firm we subsist, yet possible to swerve, since reason not impossibly may meet some specious object by the foe suborned, and fall into deception unaware, not keeping strictest watch as she was warned. Seek not temptation then, which to avoid were better, and most likely if from me thou sever not, trial will come unsought. Wouldst thou approve thy constancy, approve first thy obedience, the other who can know? Not seeing thee attempted, who attest? But if thou think trial unsought may find us both securer than thus warned thou seemest, go, for thy stay, not free, absents thee more. Go in thy native innocence, rely on what thou hast of virtue, summon all, for God towards thee hath done his part. Do thine. So spake the patriarch of mankind, but Eve persisted, yet submiss, though last, replied, With thy permission then, and thus forewarned, chiefly by what thy own last reasoning words touched only, that our trial, when least sought, may find us both perhaps far less prepared. The willinger I go, nor much expect a foe so proud will first the weaker seek, so bent the more shall shame him his repulse. Thus saying, from her husband's hand her hand soft she withdrew, and like a wood nymph light, Ored or Dryad, or of Delia's train, betook her to the groves, but Delia's self in gates surpassed and goddess-like deport, though not as she with bow and quiver armed, but with such gardening tools as art yet rude, guiltless of fire, had formed, or angels brought. To Pales or Pomona, thus adorned, like as she seemed, Pomona when she fled Vertumnus, or to Ceres in her prime, yet virgin of Proserpina from love. Her long with ardent look his eye pursued delighted, but desiring more her stay. Oft he to her his charge of quick return repeated. She to him as oft engaged to be returned by noon amid the bower, and all things in best order to invite noontide repast or afternoon's repose. O much deceived, much failing, hapless Eve, of thy presumed return, event perverse! Thou never from that hour in paradise foundest either sweet repast or sound repose. Such ambush, hid among sweet flowers and shades, waited with hellish rancour imminent, to intercept thy way, or send thee back despoiled of innocence, of faith, of bliss. For now, and since first break of dawn, the fiend, mere serpent in appearance, forth was come, and on his quest where likeliest he might find the only two of mankind, but in them the whole included race, his purposed prey. In bower and field he sought, where any tuft of grove or garden plot more pleasant lay. There tendance or plantation for delight, by fountain or by shady rivulet. He sought them both, but wished his hap might find Eve separate, he wished, but not with hope of what so seldom chanced when, to his wish, beyond his hope, Eve, separate he spies, veiled in a cloud of fragrance, where she stood, half spied, so thick the roses blushing round about her glowed, oft stooping to support each flower of slender stalk, whose head, though gay carnation purple azure or specked with gold, hung drooping unsustained. Them she upstays gently with myrtle band, mindless the while herself, though fairest unsupported flower, from her breast prop so far, and storm so nigh. Nearer he drew, and many a walk traversed of stateliest covert cedar, pine, or palm, then voluble and bold, now hid, now seen, among thick woven arborets and flowers, embordered on each bank, the hand of Eve, spot more delicious than those gardens feigned, or of revived Adonis, or renowned Alcinous, host of old Laertes' son, or that not mystic where the sapient king held dalliance with his fair Egyptian spouse. Much he did place admired the person more. As one who long in populous city pent, where houses thick and sewers annoy the air, forth issuing on a summer's morn to breathe among the pleasant villages and farms adjoined, from each thing met conceives delight. The smell of grain or tedded grass, or kine or dairy, each rural sight, each rural sound, if chance, with nymph-like step, fair virgin pass, what pleasing seemed for her now pleases more. She most in her look sums all delight. Such pleasure took the serpent to behold this flowery plat, the sweet recess of Eve, thus early, thus alone, her heavenly form angelic, but more soft and feminine, her graceful innocence, her every air of gesture, or least action, overawed his malice, and with rapine sweet bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought. That space the evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good, of enmity disarmed, of guile, of hate, of envy, of revenge. But the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure, not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects, and all his thoughts of mischief, gratulating, thus excites. Thoughts, whither have ye led me? With what sweet compulsion thus transported, to forget what hither brought us, hate, not love, nor hope of paradise, for hell, hope here to taste of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy, save what is in destroying, other joy to me is lost. Then let me not past occasion which now smiles, behold alone the woman, opportune to all attempts, her husband, for I view far round, not nigh, whose higher intellectual more I shun, and strength of courage, haughty, and of limb heroic built, though of terrestrial mould. Foe not informidable, exempt from wound I not, so much hath hell debased and pain enfeebled me to what I was in heaven. She fair, divinely fair, fits love for gods. Not terrible, though terror be in love and beauty, not approached by stronger hate, hate stronger, under show of love well feigned. The way which to her ruin now I tend. So spake the enemy of mankind, enclosed in serpent, inmate bad, and toward Eve addressed his way, not with indented wave, prone on the ground as since, but on his rear, circular base of rising folds that towered fold above fold, a surging maze. His head crested aloft, and carbuncle his eyes, with burnished neck of verdant gold erect amidst its circling spires, that on the grass floated redundant. Pleasing was his shape, and lovely, never since of serpent kind lovelier, not those that in Illyria changed. Hermione and Cadmus, or the god in Epidaurus, nor to which transformed Ammonian Jove, or Capitoline, was seen, he with Olympias, this with her who bore Scipio the height of Rome, with tract oblique at first, as one who sought access but feared to interrupt, sidelong he works his way. As when a ship by skilful steersman wrought, nigh river's mouth or foreland, where the wind veers oft, as oft so steers and shifts her sail, so varied he, and of his tortuous train curled many a wanton wreath in sight of Eve. To lure her eye she, busied, heard the sound of rustling leaves, but minded not, as used to such disports before her through the field, from every beast more duteous at her call than at Circean call the herd disguised. He, bolder now, uncalled before her stood, but as in gaze admiring oft he bowed his turret crest, and sleek enamelled neck, fawning, and licked the ground whereon she trod. His gentle dumb expression turned at length the eye of Eve to mark his play. He, glad of her attention gained, with serpent tongue organic, or impulse of vocal air, his fraudulent temptation thus began. Wonder not, sovereign mistress, if perhaps thou canst, who art sole wonder, much less arm thy looks, the heaven of mildness with disdain. Displeased that I approach thee thus and gaze insatiate, I thus single nor have feared thy awful brow, more awful thus retired. Fairest resemblance of thy Maker fair, thee all things living gaze on, all things thine by gift, and thy celestial beauty adore, with ravishment beheld. Their best beheld, where universally admired, but here, in this enclosure wild, these beasts among beholders rude, and shallow, to discern half what in thee is fair, one man except, who sees thee, and what is one, who should be seen, O goddess among gods, adored and served by angels numberless, thy daily train. So glozed the tempter, and his proem tuned, into the heart of Eve, his words made way, though at the voice much marvelling, at length, not unamazed, she thus in answer spake, and what may this mean? Language of man pronounced by tongue of brute, and human sense expressed. The first, at least, of these I thought denied to beasts whom God, on their creation day, created mute to all articulate sound. The latter I demur, for in their looks much reason, and in their actions oft appears. Thee, serpent, subtlest beast of all the field I knew, but not with human voice endued. Redouble, then, this miracle, and say, how camest thou speakable of mute, and how to me so friendly grown above the rest of brutal kind, that daily are in sight? Say, for such wonder claims attention due, to whom this guileful tempter thus replied, impress of this fair world, resplendent Eve, easy to me it is to tell thee all what thou commandest, and right thou shouldst be obeyed. I was at first as other beasts that grave the trodden herb, of abject thoughts and low, as was my food, nor aught but food, discerned or sex, and apprehended nothing high, till, on a day roving the field, I chanced a goodly tree, far distant to behold, loaden with fruit of fairest colours mixed, ruddy and gold. I nearer drew to gaze, when, from the boughs a savoury odour blown, grateful to appetite, more pleased my sense than smell of sweetest fennel, or the teats of ewe or goat dropping with milk at even. Unsucked of lamb or kid that tend their play, to satisfy the sharp desire I had of tasting those fair apples, I resolved not to defer hunger and thirst at once. Powerful persuaders, quickened at the scent of that alluring fruit, urged me so keen. About the mossy trunk I wound me soon, for high from ground the branches would require thy utmost reach or Adam's. Round the tree all other beasts that saw, with like desire, longing and envying stood, but could not reach. Amid the tree now got, where plenty hung, tempting so nigh, to pluck and eat my feel I spared not, for such pleasure till that hour, at feed or fountain, never had I found. Sated at length, ere long I might perceive strange alteration in me, to degree of reason in my inward powers, and speech wanted not long, though to this shape retained. Thenceforth to speculations high or deep I turned my thoughts, and with capacious mind considered all things visible in heaven, or earth, or middle, all things fair and good, but all that fair and good in thy divine semblance, and in thy beauty's heavenly ray, united I beheld, not fair to thine equivalent or second, which compelled me thus, though importune perhaps, to come and gaze, and worship thee of right declared sovereign, of creatures, universal dame. So talked the spirited sly snake and Eve, yet more amazed, unwary, thus replied, Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit in thee first proved. But say, where grows the tree? From hence how far? For many are the trees of God that grow in paradise, and various, yet unknown to us, in such abundance lies our choice, as leaves a greater store of fruit untouched, still hanging incorruptible, till men grow up to their provision, and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. To whom the wily adder, blithe and glad, Empress, the way is ready, and not long, beyond a row of myrtles on a flat, fast by a fountain, once more thicket past of blowing myrrh and balm. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither, soon lead then, said Eve. He, leading swiftly, rolled in tangles, and made intricate seem straight, to mischief swift. Hope elevates and joy brightens his crest, as when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapour, which the night condenses, and the cold environs round, kindled through agitation to a flame, which oft, they say, some evil spirit attends, hovering and blazing with delusive light, misleads the amazed night wanderer from his way to bogs and mires, and oft through pond or pool, there swallowed up and lost from succour far. So glistered the dire snake, and into fraud led Eve, our credulous mother, to the tree of prohibition, root of all our woe, which, when she saw, thus to her guide she spake, Serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rest with thee, wondrous indeed, if cause of such effects. But of this tree we may not taste nor touch. God so commanded, and left that command sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves, our reason is our law. To whom the tempter guilefully replied, Indeed, hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat, yet Lords declared of all in earth or air? To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden God hath said, Ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye touch it, lest ye die. She scarce had said, though brief, when now, more bold the tempter, but with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new part puts on, and, as to passion moved, fluctuates disturbed, yet comely and in act raised, as of some great matter to begin. As when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected, while each part motion, each act one audience ere the tongue, sometimes in height began, as no delay of preface brooking, through his zeal of right, so standing, moving, or to height upgrown. The tempter, all impassioned, thus began, O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thou power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should you? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener? Look on me, me who have touched and tasted, yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced? Whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil, of good, how just, of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye and be just. Not just, not God, not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbid? Why but to war? Why but to keep ye low and ignorant? His worshippers? He knows that in the day you eat thereof, your eyes, that seem so clear, yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil, as they know. That ye shall be as gods, since I as man, internal man, is but proportion meet. I of brutes, human, ye of human gods. So ye shall die, perhaps, by putting off human, to put on gods, death to be wished. Though threatened, which no worse than this can bring. And what are gods, that man may not become as they, participate in godlike food? The gods are first, and that advantage use on our belief, that all from them proceeds. I question it, for this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind, them nothing, if they all things, who enclosed knowledge of good and evil in this tree, that whoso eats thereof forthwith attains wisdom without their leave, and wherein lies the offence, that man should thus attain to know? What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy? And can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These, and many more causes import your need of this fair fruit, goddess humane. Reach then and freely taste." He ended, and his words replete with guile into her heart too easy entrance won. Fixed on the fruit she gazed, which to behold might tempt alone, and in her ears the sound yet rung of his persuasive words, impregnate with reason to her seeming and with truth. Meanwhile the hour of noon drew on, and waked an eager appetite, raised by the smell so savoury of that fruit, which with desire, inclinable now grown to touch or taste, solicited her longing eye, yet first pausing a while, thus to herself she mused. "Great are thy virtues, doubtless, best of fruits, though kept from man, and worthy to be admired, whose taste, too long forborne, at first essay gave elocution to the mute, and taught the tongue, not made for speech, to speak thy praise he also who forbids thy use, conceals not from us, naming thee the tree of knowledge, knowledge both of good and evil, forbids us then to taste, but is forbidding by thee communicated, and our want, for good unknown sure, is not had, or had, and yet unknown, is as not had at all. In plain, then, what forbids he but to know, forbids us good, forbids us to be wise. Such prohibitions bind not, but if death bind us with afterbands, what profit then our inward freedom? In the day we eat of this fair fruit, our doom is, we shall die. How dies the serpent? He hath eaten and lives, and knows and speaks and reasons and discerns. Irrational till then, for us alone was death invented? Or to us denied this intellectual food, for beasts reserved? For beasts it seems, yet that one beast which first hath tasted envies not, but brings with joy the goods befallen him, author unsuspect, friendly to man, far from deceit or guile. What fear I then? Rather, what know to fear under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death, of law or penalty? Here grows the cure of all, this fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste, of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once both body and mind? So saying, her rash hand in evil hour forth reaching to the fruit, she plucked, she eats. Earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat, sighing through all her works, gave signs of woe, that all was lost. Back to the thicket slunk the guilty serpent, and well might, for Eve, intent now wholly on her taste, naught else regarded, such delight till then as seemed in fruit she never tasted, whether true or fancied so, through expectation high of knowledge, not was Godhead from her thought. Greedily she ignored without restraint, and knew not eating death, satiate at length, and heightened as with wine, jocund and boon. Thus to herself she pleasingly began, O sovereign virtuous, precious of all trees in paradise, of operation blessed to sapience, hitherto obscured, infamed. And thy fair fruit let hang, as to no end created, but henceforth my early care, not without song, each morning and due praise shall tend thee, and the fertile burden of thy full branches offered free to all, till, dieted by thee, I grow mature in knowledge, as the gods, who all things know. Though others envy what they cannot give, for had the gift been theirs, it had not here thus grown. Experience next to thee I owe, best guide, not following thee I had remained in ignorance, thou openest wisdom's way, and givest access, though secret she retire. And I perhaps am secret. Heaven is high, high, and remote to see, from thence distinct. Each thing on earth, and other care perhaps, may have diverted from continual watch. Our great forbidder, safe with all his spies about him. But to Adam, in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change, and give him to partake full happiness with me? Or rather not, but keeps the odds of knowledge in my power, without co-partner? So to add what wants in female sex, the more to draw his love, and render me more equal, and perhaps a thing not undesirable, sometimes superior, for inferior, who is free. This may be well, but what if God have seen, and death ensue? Then I shall be no more, and Adam, wedded to another Eve, shall live with her enjoying I extinct, a death to think. Confirmed then I resolve, Adam shall share with me in bliss or woe. So dear I love him, that with him all deaths I could endure, without him live no life. So saying, from the tree her step she turned, but first low reverence done as to the power that dwelt within, whose presence had infused into the plant sciential sap, derived from nectar, drink of gods. Adam, the while, waiting desirous her return, had wove of choicest flowers her garland, to adorn her tresses, and her rural labours crown, as reapers oft are wont their harvest queen. Great joy he promised to his thoughts, and new solace in her return, so long delayed, yet oft his heart, divine of something ill, misgave him. He the faltering measure felt, and forth to meet her went, the way she took that morn when first they parted. By the tree of knowledge he must pass, there he her met. Scarce from the tree returning, in her hand a bough of fairest fruit, that downy smiled, new gathered and ambrosial smell diffused. To him she hasted, in her face excuse came prologue, and apology too prompt, which, with bland words at will, she thus addressed. Hast thou not wondered, Adam, at my stay? Thee I have missed, and thought it long deprived thy presence. Agony of love till now not felt, nor shall be twice, for nevermore mean I to try what rash untried I sought, the pain of absence from thy sight. But strange hath been the cause, and wonderful to hear, this tree is not, as we are told, a tree of danger tasted, nor to evil unknown, opening the way, but of divine effect, to open eyes, and make them gods, who taste, and hath been tasted such, the serpent wise, or not restrained as we, or not obeying, hath eaten of the fruit, and is become not dead, as we are threatened, but thenceforth endued with human voice and human sense, reasoning to admiration, and with me persuasively hath so prevailed, that I have also tasted, and have also found the effects to correspond, opener mine eyes, dim erst, dilated spirits, ampler heart, and growing up to Godhead, which for thee chiefly I sought, without thee can despise. For bliss as thou hast part, to me is bliss, tedious unshared with thee, and odious soon. Thou therefore also taste that equal lot may join us, equal joy as equal love, lest thou not tasting different degree disjoin us, and I then too late renounce deity for thee, when fate will not permit. Thus Eve with countenance blithe her story told, but in her cheek distemper flushing glowed. On the other side Adam, soon as he heard the fatal trespass done by Eve, amazed, astonied, stood and blank, while horror chill ran through his veins and all his joints relaxed. From his slack hand the garland wreathed for Eve down dropped, and all the faded roses shed. Speechless he stood, and pale, till thus at length, first to himself he inward silence broke. O fairest of creation, last and best of all God's works, creature in whom excelled whatever to sight or thought be formed, holy, divine, good, amiable or sweet, how art thou lost, how on a sudden lost, defaced, deflowered, and now to death devote. Rather, how hast thou yielded to transgress the sacred fruit forbidden? Some cursed fraud of enemy hath beguiled thee, yet unknown, and me with thee hath ruined, for with thee certain my resolution is to die. How can I live without thee? How forego thy sweet converse, and love so dearly joined, to live again in these wild woods forlorn? Should God create another Eve, and I another rib afford, yet loss of thee would never from my heart, no, no. I feel the link of nature draw me, flesh of flesh, bone of my bone, thou art, and from thy state mine never shall be parted, bliss or woe. So having said, after thoughts disturbed, submitting to what seemed remediless, thus in calm mood his words to Eve he turned. Bold deed thou hast presumed, adventurous Eve, and peril great provoked, who thus hast dared, had it been only coveting to eye that sacred fruit, sacred to abstinence, much more to taste it, under ban to touch. But past who can recall, or done undo? Not God omnipotent, nor fate, yet so perhaps thou shalt not die. Perhaps the fact is not so heinous now, for tasted fruit, profaned first by the serpent, by him first made common and unhallowed, ere our taste, nor yet on him found deadly, yet he lives. Higher degree of life inducement strong to us as likely tasting to attain proportional assent, which cannot be but to be gods or angels, demigods. Nor can I think that God, creator wise, though threatening, will in earnest so destroy us, his prime creatures, dignified so high, set over all his works, which in our fall, for us created, needs with us must fail. Dependence made, so God shall uncreate. Be frustrate, do, undo, and labour lose. Not well conceived of God, who, though his power, creation could repeat, yet would be loath us to abolish, lest the adversary triumph and say, fickle their state whom God most favours, who can please him long? Me first he ruined, now mankind, whom will he next? Matter of scorn, not to be given the foe. However, I with thee have fixed my lot. Certain to undergo like doom, if death consort with thee, death is to me as life. So forcible within my heart I feel the bond of nature draw me to my own in thee, for what thou art is mine. Our states cannot be severed. We are one flesh. To lose thee were to lose myself. So Adam and thus Eve to him replied, O glorious trial of exceeding love, illustrious evidence, example high, engaging me to emulate, but short of thy perfection, how shall I attain? Adam, from whose dear side I boast me sprung, and gladly of our union hear thee speak. One heart, one soul in both, whereof good proof this day affords, declaring thee resolved, rather than death, or aught than death more dread, shall separate us, linked in love so dear, to undergo with me one guilt, one crime. If any be of tasting this fair fruit, whose virtue, for of good still good proceeds, direct or by occasion, hath presented this happy trial of thy love, which else so eminently never had been known. Were it I thought death menaced would ensue, this my attempt I would sustain alone the worst, and not persuade thee, rather die deserted, than oblige thee with a fact pernicious to thy peace, chiefly assured remarkably so late of thy so true, so faithful love unequalled. But I feel far otherwise the event, not death, but life, augmented, opened eyes, new hopes, new joys, taste so divine that what of sweet before hath touched my sense, flat seems to this and harsh. On my experience, Adam freely taste, and fear of death deliver to the winds. So saying, she embraced him, and for joy tenderly wept, much won that he his love had so ennobled, as of choice to incur divine displeasure for her sake or death. In recompense for such compliance bad, such recompense best merits. From the bough she gave him of that fair enticing fruit. With liberal hand he scrupled not to eat, against his better knowledge, not deceived, but fondly overcome with female charm. Earth trembled from her entrails as again in pangs, and nature gave a second groan. Sky lowered, and muttering thunder, some sad drops wept at completing of the mortal sin original, while Adam took no thought, eating his fill, nor Eve to iterate her former trespass feared, the more to soothe him with her loved society, that now, as with new wine intoxicated both, they swim in mirth, and fancy that they feel divinity within them, breathing wings, wherewith to scorn the earth. But that false fruit far other operation first displayed, carnal desire inflaming, he, on Eve, began to cast a lascivious eyes, she him, as wantonly repaid, in lust they burn, till Adam thus 'gan Eve to dalliance move. Eve, now I see thou art exact of taste, and elegant of sapience no small part, since to each meaning savour we apply, and palate call judicious, I the praise yield thee, so well this day thou hast purveyed. Much pleasure we have lost while we abstain from this delightful fruit, nor known till now true relish, tasting, if such pleasure be in things. To us forbidden, it might be wished, for this one tree had been forbidden 10. But come, so well refreshed, now let us play, as meet is after such delicious fare. For never did thy beauty, since the day I saw thee first and wedded thee, adorned with all perfections, so inflame my sense with ardour to enjoy thee, fairer now than ever, bounty of this virtuous tree. So said he, and forbore not glance or toy of amorous intent, well understood of Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire. Her hand he seized, and to a shady bank, thick overhead with verdant roof embowered, he led her, nothing loath. Flowers were the couch, pansies and violets, and asphodel and hyacinth, earth's freshest, softest lap. There they their fill of love and love's disport took largely, of their mutual guilt the seal, the solace of their spin, till dewy sleep oppressed them, wearied with their amorous play. Soon as the force of that fallacious fruit, that with exhilarating vapour bland about their spirits had played, and inmost powers made air, was now exhaled, and gross asleep, bred of unkindly fumes, with conscious dreams encumbered, now had left them. Up they rose as from unrest, and each the other viewing, soon found their eyes how opened, and their minds how darkened. Innocence, that as a veil had shadowed them from knowing ill, was gone. Just confidence, and native righteousness, and honour, from about them naked left to guilty shame, he covered, but his robe uncovered more. So rose the Danite strong, Herculean Samson, from the harlot lap of Philistine Delilah, and waked shorn of his strength. They, destitute and bare of all their virtue, silent and in face confounded, long they sat, as strucken mute. Till Adam, though not less than Eve abashed, at length gave utterance to these words constrained. O Eve, in evil hour thou didst give ear to counterfeit man's voice, true in our fall, false in our promised rising. Since our eyes opened, we find indeed, and find we know both good and evil, good lost and evil got, bad fruit of knowledge, if this be to know, which leaves us naked thus, of honour void, of innocence, of faith, of purity, our wonted ornaments now soiled and stained, and in our faces evident the signs of foul concupiscence, whence evil store, even shame, the last of evils, of the first be sure then. How shall I behold the face henceforth of God or angel, erst with joy and rapture so oft beheld? Those heavenly shapes insufferably bright. Oh, might I here in solitude live savage, in some glade obscured, where highest woods, impenetrable to star or sunlight, spread their umbrage broad, and brown as evening, cover me, ye pines, ye cedars, with innumerable boughs. Hide me where I may never see them more. But let us now, as in bad plight, devise what best may for the present serve to hide the parts of each from other, that seem most to shame obnoxious and unseemliest seen. Some tree whose broad smooth leaves together sewed, and girded on our loins, may cover round those middle parts, that this newcomer, shame, there sit not, and reproach us as unclean. So counselled he, and both together went into the thickest wood. There soon they choose the fig tree, not that kind for fruit renowned, but such as at this day, to Indians known, in Malabar or Deacon spreads her arms, branching so broad and long that, in the ground, the bended twigs take root, and daughters grow about the mother tree, a pillared shade, high overarched, and echoing walks between. There, oft the Indian herdsman, shunning heat, shelters in cool, and tends his pasturing herds. At loopholes cut through thickest shade, those leaves they gathered, broad as Amazonian large, and what skill they had, together sewed, to gird their waist, vain covering, if to hide their guilt and dreaded shame. Oh, how unlike to that first naked glory! Such of late Columbus found the American, so girt with feathered cinctia, naked else, and wild among the trees on isles and woody shores. Thus fenced, and, as they thought, their shame in part covered, but not at rest or ease of mind, they sat them down to weep, nor only tears rained at their eyes, but high winds, worse within, began to rise, high passions, anger, hate, mistrust, suspicion, discord, and shook sore their inward state of mind, calm region once and full of peace, now tossed and turbulent, for understanding ruled not, and the will heard not her love, both in subjection now to sensual appetite, who, from beneath usurping over sovereign reason, claimed superior sway. From thus distempered breast, Adam, estranged in look and altered style, speech intermitted thus to Eve renewed. Would thou hast hearkened to my words and stayed with me, as I besought thee when that strange desire of wandering, this unhappy morn I know not whence possessed thee. We had then remained still happy, not as now, despoiled of all our good, shamed, naked, miserable. Let none henceforth seek needless cause to approve the faith they owe. When earnestly they seek such proof, conclude, they then begin to fail. To whom, soon moved with touch of blame, thus Eve, what words have passed thy lips, Adam severe? Imputest thou that to my default, or will of wandering, as thou callest it, which, who knows, but might as ill have happened thou being by, or to thyself perhaps, hadst thou been there, or here, the attempt thou couldst not have discerned fraud in the serpent, speaking as he spake, no ground of enmity between us known. Why he should mean me ill, or seek to harm, was I to have never parted from thy side? As good have grown there still a lifeless rib. Being as I am, why didst not thou, the head, command me absolutely not to go, going into such danger, as thou saidst? Too facile then, thou didst not much gainsay, nay, didst permit, approve, and fair dismiss. Hadst thou been firm and fixed in thy dissent, neither had I transgressed, nor thou with me. To whom, then first incensed, Adam replied, Is this the love, is this the recompense of mine to thee? Ingrateful Eve, expressed immutable. When thou wert lost, not I, who might have lived and joyed mortal bliss, yet willingly chose rather death with thee? And am I now upbraided as the cause of thy transgressing? Not enough severe, it seems, in thy restraint. What could I more? I warned thee, I admonished thee, foretold the danger, and the lurking enemy that lay in wait. Beyond this had been force, and force upon free will hath here no place. But confidence then bore thee on, secure either to meet no danger or to find matter of glorious trial, and perhaps I also erred in overmuch admiring what seemed in thee so perfect that I thought no evil durst attempt thee, but I rue the error now which is become my crime, and thou the accuser. Thus it shall befall him who, to worth in women overtrusting, lets her will rule, restraint she will not brook, and left to herself, if evil thence ensue, she first his weak indulgence will accuse. Thus they in mutual accusation spent the fruitless hours, but neither self-condemning, and of their vain contest appeared no end. Book 10. Meanwhile, the heinous and despiteful act of Satan done in paradise, and how he, in the serpent, had perverted Eve, her husband she, to taste the fatal fruit, was known in heaven. For what can scape the eye of God, all-seeing, or deceive his heart, omniscient? Who, in all things wise and just, hindered not Satan to attempt the mind of man, with strength entire and free will armed, complete, to have discovered and repulsed whatever wiles of foe or seeming friend. For still they knew, and ought to have still remembered, the high injunction not to taste that fruit. Whoever tempted, which they not obeying, incurred, what could they less? The penalty. and manifold in sin deserve to fall. Up into heaven from paradise in haste the angelic guards ascended, mute and sad, for man, for his state by this they knew, much wondering how the subtle fiend had stolen entrance unseen. Soon as the unwelcome news from earth arrived at heaven gate, displeased all were who heard. Dim sadness did not spare that time celestial visages, yet mixed with pity violated not their bliss. About the new arrived in multitudes the ethereal people ran, to hear and know how all befell. They towards the throne supreme accountable made haste, to make appear with righteous plea their utmost vigilance, and easily approved, when the Most High Eternal Father from his secret cloud amidst in thunder uttered thus his voice. Assembled angels and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge, be not dismayed nor troubled at these tidings from the earth, which your sincerest care could not prevent. Foretold so lately what would come to pass, when first this temper crossed the gulf from hell. I told ye then he should prevail and speed on his bad errand. Man should be seduced and flattered out of all, believing lies against his Maker, no decree of mine concurring to necessitate his fall, or touch with lightest moment of impulse his free will to her own inclining left in even scale. But fallen he is, and now what rests but that the mortal sentence pass on his transgression? Death denounced that day, which he presumes already vain and void, because not yet inflicted, as he feared, by some immediate stroke, but soon shall find forbearance no acquittance, ere day end. Justice shall not return as bounty scorned, but whom sent I to judge them? Whom but thee, vicegerent Son? To thee I have transferred all judgment, whether in heaven or earth or hell. Easy it may be seen that I intend mercy colleague with justice, sending thee man's friend, his mediator, his designed both ransom and redeemer voluntary, and destined man himself to judge man fallen. So spake the Father, and unfolding bright toward the right hand his glory, on the Son blazed forth unclouded deity. He, full resplendent, all his Father manifest expressed, and thus divinely answered mild, Mine, both in heaven and earth, to do thy will supreme, that thou in me, thy Son beloved, mayest ever rest well pleased. I go to judge on earth these thy transgressors, but thou knowest, whoever judged the worst on me must light, when time shall be, for so I undertook before thee, and, not repenting, this obtain of right, that I may mitigate their doom, on me derived, yet I shall temper so justice with mercy, as may illustrate most them fully satisfied, and thee appeased. Attendants none shall need, nor train, where none are to behold the judgment, but the judged, those two, the third best absent is condemned. Convict by flight, and rebel to all law. Conviction to the serpent none belongs. Thus saying, from his radiant seat he rose of high collateral glory, him thrones and powers, princedoms, and dominations ministrant, accompanied to heaven gate, from whence Eden and all the coast in prospect lay. Down he descended straight, the speed of God's time counts not, though with swiftest minutes winged. Now was the sun in western cadence low from noon, and gentle airs due at their hour, to fan the earth now waked and usher in that evening cool, when he, from wrath more cool, came the mild judge and intercessor both, to sentence man. The voice of God they heard, now waking in the garden, by soft winds brought to their ears, while day declined. They heard, and from his presence hid themselves among the thickest trees, both man and wife, till God, approaching, thus to Adam called aloud, "Where art thou, Adam? Wont with joy to meet, my coming seen far off? I miss thee here, not pleased, thus entertained with solitude, where obvious duty ere while appeared unsought. Or come I less conspicuous, or what change absents thee, or what chance detains? Come forth." He came, and with him Eve, more loath, though first to offend, discountenanced both, and discomposed. Love was not in their looks, either to God or to each other, but apparent guilt, and shame, and perturbation and despair, anger and obstinacy, and hate and guile. Whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief, "I heard thee in the garden, and of thy voice, afraid, being naked, hid myself." To whom the gracious judge, without revile, replied, "My voice thou oft hast heard, and hast not feared, but still rejoiced. How is it now become so dreadful to thee, that thou art naked? Who hath told thee? Hast thou eaten of the tree, whereof I gave thee charge thou shouldst not eat?" To whom thus Adam, sore beset, replied, "O heaven, in evil strait this day I stand before my judge, either to undergo myself the total crime, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, whose failing, while her faith to me remains, I should conceal and not expose to blame by my complaint, but strict necessity subdues me, and calamitous constraint, lest on my head both sin and punishment, however insupportable, be all devolved, though should I hold my pace, yet thou wouldst easily detect what I conceal. This woman, whom thou madest to be my help, and gavest me as thy perfect gift, so good, so fit, so acceptable, so divine, that from her hand I could suspect no ill, and what she did, whatever in itself her doing seemed to justify the deed, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. To whom the sovereign presence thus replied, "Was she thy God, that her thou didst obey before his voice? Or was she made thy guide, superior, or but equal, that to her thou didst resign thy manhood, and the place wherein God set thee above her made of thee, and for thee, whose perfection far excelled hers in all real dignity? Adorned she was indeed, and lovely, to attract thy love, not thy subjection. And her gifts were such as under government well seemed unseemly to bear rule, which was thy part and person, hadst thou known thyself aright." So, having said, he thus to Eve, in few, "Say, woman, what is this which thou hast done?" To whom said Eve, with shame nigh overwhelmed, confessing soon, yet not before her judge, bold or loquacious, thus abashed replied, "The serpent me beguiled, and I did eat." Which when the Lord God heard, without delay to judgment he proceeded on the accursed serpent, though brute, unable to transfer the guilt on him who made him instrument of mischief and polluted from the end of his creation, justly then accursed, as vitiated in nature, more to know concerned not man, since he no further knew, nor altered his offence. Yet God at last to Satan first in sin his doom applied, though in mysterious terms judged as then best, and on the serpent thus his curse let fall. Because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle. Each beast of the field upon thy belly grovelling shall go, and dust shall eat all the days of thy life. Between thee and the woman I will put enmity, and between thine and her seed shall bruise thy head, thou bruise his heel. So spake this oracle, then verified when Jesus, son of Mary, second Eve, saw Satan fall like lightning down from heaven. Prince of the air, then, rising from his grave, spoiled principalities and powers, triumphed in open show, and with ascension bright, captivity led captive through the air. The realm itself of Satan, long usurped, whom he shall tread at last under our feet. Even he, who now foretold his fatal bruise, and to the woman thus his sentence turned. Thy sorrow, I will greatly multiply thy conception. Children thou shalt bring in sorrow forth, and to thy husband's will thine shall submit. He over thee shall rule. On Adam last thus judgment he pronounced, because thou hast hearkened to the voice of thy wife, and eaten of the tree concerning which I charged thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat thereof. Cursed the ground for thy sake, thou in sorrow shalt eat thereof all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles it shall bring thee forth unbid, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for thou out of the ground wast taken. Know thy birth, for dust thou art, and shalt to dust return. So judged he man, both judge and saviour sent, and the instant stroke of death, denounced that day, removed far off, then, pitying how they stood before him, naked, to the air, that now must suffer change, disdained not to begin thenceforth the form of servant to assume, as when he washed his servants' feet, so now, as father of his family, he clad their nakedness with skins of beasts of slain, or as the snake with youthful coat repaid, and thought not much to clothe his enemies, nor he their outward only with the skins of beasts, but inward nakedness much more. Opprobrious with his robe of righteousness, arraying, covered from his father's sight. To him with swift ascent he up-returned into his blissful bosom, reassumed, in glory as of old, to him appeased all, though all-knowing what had passed with man, recounted, mixing intercession sweet. Meanwhile, ere thus was sinned and judged on earth, within the gates of hell, sat sin and death, in counterview within the gates that now stood open wide, belching outrageous flame, far into chaos, since the fiend passed through, sin opening, who thus now to death began. O son, why sit we here each other viewing idly, while Satan, our great author, thrives in other worlds, and happier seats provides for us, his offspring dear? It cannot be that success attends him, if mishap. Ere this he had returned, with fury driven by his avengers, since no place like this can fit his punishment of their revenge. Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing, and dominion given me large beyond this deep, whatever draws me on, or sympathy, or some connatural force, powerful at greatest distance to unite, with secret amity, things of like kind, inseparable, must with me along, but lest the difficulty of passing back stay his return perhaps over this gulf, impassable, impervious. Let us try adventurous work, yet to thy power and mine not unagreeable, to found a path over this main from hell, to that new world where Satan now prevails, a monument of merit high to all the infernal host, easing their passage hence for intercourse or transmigration, as their lot shall lead. Nor can I miss the way, so strongly drawn by this new-felt attraction and instinct, whom thus the meagre shadow answered soon. Go whither fate and inclination strong leads thee. I shall not lag behind nor err the way thou leading. Such a scent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savour of death from all things there that live. Nor shall I to the work thou enterprisest be wanting, but afford thee equal aid. So saying, with delight he snuffled the smell of mortal change on earth, as when a flock of ravenous fowl, though many a league remote, against the day of battle to a field where armies lie encamped, come flying, lured with scent of living carcasses designed for death, the following day in bloody fight, so scented the grim feature, and upturned his nostril wide into the murky air, sagacious of his quarry from so far. Then both from out hell gates into the waste-wide anarchy of chaos, damp and dark, flew diverse, and with power, their power was great, hovering upon the waters what they met solid or slimy, as in raging sea, tossed up and down, together crowded drove, from each side shoaling towards the mouth of hell, as when two polar winds blowing adverse upon the Cronian sea together drive mountains of ice that stop the imagined way beyond Petsora eastward to the rich Cathayan coast, the aggregated soil, death, with his mace, petrific, cold and dry, as with a trident smote, and fixed as firm as Delos, floating once, the rest his look bound with Gorgonian rigour, not to move, and with asphaltic slime, broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell, the gathered beach they fastened, and the more immense wrought on over the foaming deep, high-arched, a bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of this now fenceless world, forfeit to death, from hence a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive, down to hell. So, if great things to small may be compared, Xerxes, the liberty of Greece to yoke, from Susa, his Memnonian palace high, came to the sea, and over Hellespont bridging his way, Europe with Asia joined, and scourged with many a stroke the indignant waves. Now had they brought the work by wondrous art pontifical, a ridge of pendant rock, over the vexed abyss, following the track of Satan to the self-same place where he first lighted from his wing, and landed safe from out of chaos to the outside bare of this round world. With pins of adamant and chains they made all fast, too fast they made and durable. And now, in little space, the confines met, of empyrean heaven, and of this world, and on the left hand, hell, with long reach interposed, 3 several ways in sight, to each of these 3 places led. And now, their way to earth they had descried, to paradise first tending, when, behold, Satan, in likeness of an angel bright, betwixt the centaur and the scorpion steering his zenith, while the sun in Aries rose. Disguised he came, but those his children dear, their parents soon discerned, though in disguise he, after Eve seduced, unminded slunk into the wood fast by, and changing shape, to observe the sequel, saw his guileful act by Eve, though all unweeting, seconded upon her husband, saw their shame, that sought vain covertures. But when he saw descend the Son of God to judge them, terrified he fled, not hoping to escape, but shun the present, fearing guilty, what his wrath might suddenly inflict. That past, returned by night, and listening where the hapless pair sat in their discourse and various plaint, thence gathered his own doom, which understood not instant, but of future time, with joy and tidings fraught. To hell he now returned, and at the brink of chaos, near the foot of this new wondrous pontifice, unhope met, who to meet him came, his offspring dear. Great joy was at their meeting, and at sight of that stupendous bridge, his joy increased. Long he admiring stood, till Sin, his fair enchanting daughter, thus the silence broke. O parent, these are thy magnific deeds, thy trophies, which thou viewest as not thine own. Thou art their author and prime architect, for I no sooner in my heart divined my heart, which by a secret harmony still moves with thine, joined in connection sweet, that thou on earth hast prospered, which thy looks now also evidence, but straight I felt, though distant from thee worlds between, yet felt, that I must after thee with this thy son, such fatal consequence unites us three. Hell could no longer hold us in our bounds, nor this unvoyageable gulf obscure detain from following thy illustrious track. Thou hast achieved our liberty, confined within hell gates till now, thou us empowered to fortify thus far, and overlay with this portentous bridge, the dark abyss. Thy now is all this world, thy virtue hath won what thy hands builded not, thy wisdom gained with odds what war hath lost, and fully avenged our foil in heaven. Here thou shalt monarch reign, there didst not, there let him still victor sway, as battle hath adjudged, from this new world retiring by his own doom, alienated, and henceforth monarchy with thee, divide of all things, parted by the imperial bounds, his quadrature from thy orbicular world, or try thee now more dangerous to his throne, whom thus the Prince of Darkness answered glad. Fair daughter, and thou son and grandchild both, high proof ye now have given to be the race of Satan, for I glory in the name, antagonist of heaven's almighty King, amply have merited of me, of all the infernal empire that so near heaven's door triumphal with triumphal act have met, mine with this glorious work, and made one realm, hell, and this world, one realm, one continent of easy thoroughfare. Therefore, while I descend through darkness on your road with ease, to my associate powers, them to acquaint with these successes, and with them rejoice, you too this way, among these numerous orbs, all yours, right down to paradise descend, there dwell, and reign in bliss, thence on the earth, dominion exercise, and in the air, chiefly on man, sole lord of all declared, him first make sure your thrall, and lastly kill. My substitutes I send ye, and create plenipotent on earth, of matchless might issuing from me. On your joint vigour now, my hold of this new kingdom all depends, through sin, to death exposed by my exploit. If your joint power prevail, the affairs of hell no detriment need fear. Go and be strong. So saying, he dismissed them. They with speed their course through thickest constellations held, spreading their bane, the blasted stars looked wan, and planets struck, real eclipse they suffered. The other way Satan went down the Kusi to Hellgate. On either side disparted chaos, overbuilt exclaimed, and with rebounding surge the bars assailed, that scorned his indignation through the gate, wide open and unguarded. Satan passed, and all about found desolate, for those appointed to sit there had left their charge, flown to the upper world. The rest were all far to the inland retired, about the walls of Pandemonium, city and proud seat of Lucifer, so by illusion called of that bright star to Satan paragoned. There kept their watch the legions, while the grand in council sat, solicitous what chance might intercept their emperor sent. So he departing gave command, and they observed, as when the Tartar from the Russian foe by Astrakhan over the snowy plains retires, or Bactrian Sophie from the horns of Turkish crescent leaves all waste beyond the realm of Alajul in his retreat to Tauris or Casbin. So these, the late heaven-banished host, left desert, utmost hell, many a dark league, reduced in careful watch round their metropolis, and now expecting each hour their great adventurer from the search of foreign worlds, he, through the midst unmarked, in show, plebeian, angel, militant of lowest order, passed, and from the door of that Plutonian hall, invisible, ascended his high throne, which, under state of richest texture spread at the upper end, was placed in regal lustre. Down a while he sat, and round about him saw unseen, at last, as from a cloud, his fulgent head and shape star-bright appeared, or brighter, clad with what permissive glory since his fall was left him, or false glitter, all amazed at that so sudden blaze. The Stygian throng bent their aspect, and whom they wished beheld, their mighty chief returned. Loud was the acclaim. Forth rushed in haste the great consulting peers. Congratulant approached him, who with hand silence and with these words attention won. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, for in possession such, not only of right, I call ye and declare ye now, returned successful beyond hope, to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit, abominable, accursed, the house of woe and dungeon of our tyrant. Now possess, as lords, a spacious world to our native heaven, little inferior, by my adventure hard with peril great achieved. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged the unreal vast, unabounded deep of horrible confusion, over which by sin and death a broad way now is paved, to expedite your glorious march. But I toiled out of my uncouth passage, forced to ride the untractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild, that, jealous of their secrets, fiercely opposed my journey strange, with clamorous uproar protesting fates supreme. Thence how I found the new created world, which fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful of absolute perfection. Therein, man, placed in a paradise, by our exile made happy, him by fraud I have seduced from his creator, and the more to increase your wonder, with an apple he thereat offended, worth your laughter, hath given up both his beloved man and all his world. To sin and death a prey, and so to us without our hazard, labour, or alarm, to range in, and to dwell, and over man to rule, as over all he should have ruled. True is, me also he hath judged, or rather me not, but the brute serpent in whose shape man I deceived. That which to me belongs is enmity, which he will put between me and mankind. I am to bruise his heel, his seed, when is not set, shall bruise my head. A world who would not purchase with a bruise or much more grievous pain. Ye have the account of my performance. What remains, ye gods, but up and enter now into full bliss? So having said, a while he stood, expecting their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when, contrary, he hears on all sides from innumerable tongues a dismal universe hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more, his visage drawn he felt to sharp and spare. His arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell. A monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant but in vain, a greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned. According to his doom, he would have spoke but hiss for hiss, returned with forked tongue to forked tongue. For now were all transformed alike, to serpents all, as accessories. To his bold riot, dreadful was the din of hissing through the hall, thick swarming now with complicated monsters head and tail, scorpion and asp and amphispina dire, cerists horned, hydrus and helops drear, and dipsus. Not so thick swarmed once the soil, bedropped with blood of Gorgon, or the isle of Fusa, but still great as he the midst, now dragon gown, larger than whom the sun engendered in the Pythian veil, or slime, huge python, and his power, no less he seemed above the rest still to retain. They all him followed, issuing forth to the open field, where all yet left of that revolted rout. Heaven fallen, in station stood or just array, sublime with expectation, when to see in triumph issuing forth their glorious chief they saw, but other sight instead, a crowd of ugly serpents. Horror on them fell, and horrid sympathy, for what they saw. They felt themselves now changing. Down their arms, down fell both spear and shield. Down they as fast, and the dire hiss renewed, and the dire form catched by contagion, like in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant, turned to exploding hiss, triumph to shame, cast on themselves from their own mouths. There stood a grove hard by, sprung up with this their change, his will who reigns above to aggravate their penance, laden with fair fruit, like that which grew in paradise, the bait of Eve, used by the tempter. On that prospect strange, their earnest eyes they fixed, imagining for one forbidden tree a multitude now risen, to work them further woe or shame, yet parched with scalding thirst and hunger fierce, though to delude them sent, could not abstain. But on they rolled in heaps, and up the trees climbing sat thicker than the snaky locks that curled Magira. Greedily they plucked the fruitage fair to sight, like that which grew near that bituminous lake where Sodom flamed. This more delusive, not the touch, but taste deceived. They, fondly thinking to allay their appetite with gust, instead of fruit, chewed bitter ashes, which the offended taste, with spattering noise rejected. Oft they essayed, hunger and thirst constraining, drugged as oft, with hatefullest disrelish, reeved their jaws, with soot and cinders filled, so oft they fell into the same illusion, not as man whom they triumphed once lapsed. Thus were they plagued and worn with famine, long and ceaseless hiss, till their lost shape permitted, they resumed, yearly enjoined, some say, to undergo this annual humbling, certain numbered days, to dash their pride and joy, for man seduced. However, some tradition they dispersed among the heathen of their purchase got, and fabled how the serpent, whom they called Ophion, with Eurynome, the wide encroaching Eve perhaps, had first the rule of high Olympus, thence by Saturn driven, and Ops, ere yet Dictaean Jove was born. Meanwhile in paradise the hellish pair too soon arrived, sin, there in power before, once actual, now in body, and to dwell habitual habitant, behind her death, close following pace for pace, not mounted yet on his pale horse, to whom sin thus began. Second of Satan sprung all-conquering death. What thinkest thou of our empire now? Though earned with travel difficult, not better far than still at hell's dark threshold to have sat watch, unnamed, undreaded, and thyself half-starved. Whom thus the sin-born monster answered soon, to me, who with eternal famine pine, alike is hell, or paradise, or heaven. There best, where most with ravine I may meet, which here, though plenteous, all too little seems to stuff this more, this vast unhide-bound corpse. To whom the incestuous mother thus replied, Thou, therefore, on these herbs and fruits and flowers, feed first, on each beast next, and fish and fowl, no homely morsels, and whatever thing the scythe of time mows down, devour unspared, till I, in man residing, through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions, all infect, and season him thy last and sweetest prey. This said, they both betook them several ways, both to destroy or unimmortal make all kinds, and for destruction to mature sooner or later, which the Almighty seeing from his transcendent seat, the saints among, to those bright orders, uttered thus his voice, See, with what heat these dogs of hell advance to waste and havoc yonder world, which I, so fair and good created, and had still kept in that state, had not the folly of man let in these wasteful furies, who impute folly to me, so doth the prince of hell and the adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter and possess a place so heavenly and conniving, seem to gratify my scornful enemies, that laugh, as if transported with some fit of passion, I to them had quitted all, at random yielded up to their misrule, and know not that I called and drew them thither, my hell-hounds, to lick up the draught and filth, which man's polluting sin with taint hath shed on what was pure, till, crammed and gorged, nigh burst, with sucked and glutted offal, at one sling of thy victorious arm, well-pleasing Son, both sin and death, an yawning grave at last, through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell forever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. Then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure, to sanctity, that shall receive no stain till then. The curse pronounced on both precedes. He ended, and the heavenly audience loud sung Hallelujah, as the sound of seas, through multitude that sung, Just are thy ways, righteous are thy decrees on all thy works, who can extenuate thee? Next to the sun, destined restorer of mankind, by whom new heaven and earth shall to the ages rise, or down from heaven descend. Such was their song, while the Creator, calling forth by name his mighty angels, gave them several charge, as sorted best with present things. The sun had first his precept so to move, so shine, as might affect the earth with cold and heat, scarce tolerable, and from the north to cool decrepit winter, from the south to bring solstitial summer's heat. To the blanc moon her office they prescribed, to the other 5 their planetary motions and aspects in sextile, square, and trine, and opposite, of noxious efficacy, and when to join in synod unbenign, and taught the fixed their influence malignant, when to shower, which of them rising with the sun, or falling, should prove tempestuous. To the winds they set their corners, when with bluster to confound sea, air, and shore, the thunder when to roll with terror through the dark aerial hall. Some say he bid his angels turn askance the poles of earth, twice 10 degrees and more, from the sun's axle they with labour pushed oblique the centric globe. Some say the sun was bid turn reins from the equinoctial road like distant breath to Taurus, with the 7 Atlantic sisters and the Spartan twins, up to the tropic crab, thence down amain by Leo and the Virgin and the scales, as deep as Capricorn, to bring in change of seasons to each clime. Else had the spring perpetual smiled on earth with verdant flowers, equal in days and nights, except to those beyond the polar circles. To them day had unbenighted shone, while the low sun, to recompense his distance, in their sight had rounded still the horizon, and not known or east or west, which had forbid the snow, from cold Estotaland, and south as far beneath Magellan. At that tasted fruit the sun, as from Thyestean banquet, turned his course intended. Else how had the world inhabited, though sinless, more than now, avoided pinching cold and scorching heat? These changes in the heavens, though slow, produced like change on sea and land, sideral blast, vapour and mist, and exhalation hot, corrupt and pestilent. Now from the north of Norumbiga and the Samode shore, bursting their brazen dungeon, armed with ice and snow and hail, and stormy gust and flaw, Boreas and Kusius, and Argestes loud, and Thrasius, rend the woods, and seas upturn, with adverse blast upturns them from the south, Notus, and a fair black, with thunderous clouds from Ceriliona. Thwart of these, as fierce, forth rush the Levant and the ponent winds, Eurus and Zephyr, with their lateral noise, Sirocco and Libecchio. Thus began outrage from lifeless things, but discord first, daughter of sin, among the irrational death introduced, through fierce antipathy. Beast now with beast gan war, and fowl with fowl, and fish with fish, to graze the herb all leaving, devoured each other, nor stood much in awe of man, but fled him, or, with countenance grim, glared on him passing. These were from without the growing miseries which Adam saw already in part, though hid in gloomiest shade, to sorrow abandoned, but worse felt within, and in a troubled sea of passion tossed, thus to disburden, sought with sad complaint. O miserable of happy, is this the end of this new glorious world, and me so late the glory of that glory, who now become accursed of blessed? Hide me from the face of God, whom to behold was then my height of happiness. Yet well, If here would end the misery, I deserved it and would bear my own deservings. But this will not serve. All that I eat or drink, or shall beget, is propagated curse. O voice, once heard delightfully, increase and multiply. Now death to hear, for what can I increase or multiply, but curses on my head? Who, of all ages to succeed, but feeling the evil on him, brought by me, will curse my head? I'll fare our ancestor impure. For this we may thank Adam, but his thanks shall be the execration. So, besides mine own that bide upon me, all from me shall with a fierce reflux on me rebound, on me, as on their natural centre, light heavy, though in their place. O fleeting joys of paradise, dear bought with lasting woes! Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me, or here place in this delicious garden, as my will concurred, not to my being? It were but right and equal to reduce me to my dust, desirous to resign and render back all I received, unable to perform thy terms too hard, by which I was to hold the good I sought not. To the loss of that sufficient penalty, why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems, yet, to say truth, too late, I thus contest. Then should have been refused those terms whatever, when they were proposed. Thou didst accept them. Wilt thou enjoy the good? Then cavil the conditions. And though God made thee without thy leave, what if thy son prove disobedient and reproved? Retort, wherefore didst thou beget me? I sought it not. Wouldst thou admit for his contempt of thee that proud excuse? Yet him not thy election, but natural necessity begot. God made thee of choice his own, and of his own to serve him. Thy reward was of his grace, thy punishment then justly is at his will. Be it so, for I submit his doom is fair, that dust I am, and shall to dust return. O welcome hour whenever! Why delays his hand to execute what his decree fixed on this day? Why do I overlive? Why am I mocked with death, and lengthened out to deathless pain? How gladly would I meet mortality, my sentence, and be earth insensible. How glad would lay me down as in my mother's lap. There I should rest and sleep secure. His dreadful voice no more would thunder in my ears. No fear of worse to me and to my offspring would torment me with cruel expectation. Yet one doubt pursues me still, lest all I cannot die, lest that pure breath of life, the spirit of man which God inspired, cannot together perish with this corporeal clod. Then, in the grave or in some other dismal place, who knows but I shall die a living death? O thought horrid if true! Yet why? It was but breath of life that sinned. What dies but what had life and sin? The body properly had neither. All of me then shall die. Let this appease the doubt, since human reach no further knows. For though the Lord of all be infinite, is his wrath also? Be it man is not so, but mortal doomed. How can he exercise wrath without end on man, whom death must end? Can he make deathless death? That were to make strange contradiction, which to God himself impossible is held, as argument of weakness, not of power. Will he draw out for anger's sake, finite to infinite? In punished man, to satisfy his rigour, satisfied never? That were to extend his sentence beyond dust and nature's law. by which all causes else, according still to the reception of their matter, act, not to the extent of their own sphere, but say that death be not one stroke, as I supposed, bereaving sense, but endless misery from this day onward, which I feel begun both in me and without me, and so last to perpetuity. Ay, me, that fear comes thundering back with dreadful revolution on my defenceless head. Both death and I am found eternal and incorporate both, nor I, on my part, single. In me all posterity stands cursed, fair patrimony, that I must leave ye, sons. Oh, were I able to waste it all myself and leave ye none. So disinherited, how would you bless me? Now your curse. Ah, why should all mankind, for one man's fault, thus guiltless be condemned? It's guiltless? But from me what can proceed but all corrupt, both mind and will depraved, not to do only, but to will the same with me? How can they then acquitted stand in sight of God? Him, after all disputes forced I absolve, all my evasions vain, and reasonings, though through mazes, led me still but to my own conviction. First and last on me only, as the source and spring of all corruption, all the blame lights due, so might the wrath. Fond wish, couldst thou support that burden heavier than the earth to bear? Than all the world, much heavier, though divided with that bad woman? Thus, what thou desirest and what thou fearest alike destroys all hope of refuge and concludes thee miserable beyond all past example and future. To Satan only like both crime and doom, O conscience, into what abyss of fears and horrors hast thou driven me, out of which I find no way, from deep to deeper plunged. Thus Adam to himself lamented loud through the still night, not now, as ere man fell, wholesome and cool and mild, but with black air, accompanied with damps and dreadful gloom, which to his evil conscience represented all things with double terror. On the ground outstretched he lay, on the cold ground, and oft cursed his creation. Death as oft accursed of tardy execution, since denounced the day of his offence. Why comes not death, said he, with one thrice acceptable stroke, to end me? Shall truth fail to keep her word? Justice divine, not hasten to be just? But death comes not at call. Justice divine mends not her slowest pace for prayers or cries, O woods, O fountains, hillocks, dales, and bowers. With other echo late I taught your shades to answer and resound far other song, whom thus afflicted when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed, but her with stern regard he thus repelled. Out of my sight, thou serpent! That name best befits thee with him leagued, thyself as false and hateful, nothing wants but that thy shape, like his and colour serpentine, may show thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form, pretended to hellish falsehood, snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wondering vanity, when least was safe, rejected my forewarning and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, him overweening to overreach, but with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled, by him thou, I by thee, to trust thee from my side, imagined wise, constant, mature, not all was but a show, rather than solid virtue, all but a rib, crooked by nature, bent, as now appears, more to the part sinister, from me drawn. Well, if thrown out, as supernumerary, to my just number found, oh, why did God, Creator wise, that peopled highest heaven, with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill the world at once with men, as angels, without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not been befallen, and more that shall befall, innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares, and straight conjunction with this sex, for either he never shall find out fit mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gained by a far worse, or, if she love withheld by parents, or his happiest choice too late, shall meet, already linked and wedlocked bound, to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause, to human life and household peace confound. He added not, and from her turned, but Eve, not so repulsed, with tears that ceased not flowing, and tresses all disordered, at his feet fell humble, and embracing them besought his peace, and thus proceeded in her plaint. Forsake me not thus, Adam. Witness heaven what love sincere and reverence in thy heart. I bear thee, and unweeting have offended, unhappily deceived. Thy suppliant I beg, and clasp thy knees, bereave me not, whereon I live, thy gentle looks, thy aid, thy counsel in this uttermost distress. My only strength and stay, forlorn of thee, whither shall I betake me, where subsist? While yet we live, scarce one short hour perhaps, between us two let there be peace, both joining, as joined in injuries one enmity against a foe by doom express assigned us. That cruel serpent, on me exercise not thy hatred for this misery befallen, on me already lost, me then thyself more miserable. Both have sinned, but thou against God only, I against God and thee, and to the place of judgment will return. There with my cries importune heaven, that all the sentence from thy head removed may light on me, so cause to thee of all this woe, me, only me, just object of his ire. She ended weeping, and her lowly plight, immovable, till peace obtained from fault, acknowledged and deplored, in Adam wrought commiseration. Soon his heart relented towards her, his life so late and sole delight, now at his feet submissive in distress, creature so fair his reconcilement seeking, his counsel whom she had displeased, his aid, as one disarmed, his anger all he lost, and thus with peaceful words upraised her soon. Unwary and too desirous as before, so now of what thou knowest not, who desirest the punishment all on thyself, alas! Bear thine own first, ill able to sustain his full wrath, whose thou feelest as yet least part, and my displeasure bearest so ill. If prayers could alter high decrees, I to that place would speed before thee, and be louder heard, that on my head all might be visited, thy frailty and infirmer sex forgiven, to me committed, and by me exposed. But rise, let us no more contend, nor blame each other, blamed enough elsewhere, but strive in offices of love, how we may lighten each other's burden in our share of woe. Since this day's death denounced, if aught I see will prove no sudden, but a slow-paced evil, a long day's dying to augment our pain, and to our seed, oh, hapless seed, derived. To whom thus Eve, recovering heart, replied, Adam, by sad experiment I know how little weight my words with thee can find, found so erroneous, thence by just event found so unfortunate. Nevertheless, restored by thee, vile as I am, to place of new acceptance, hopeful to regain thy love and sole contentment of my heart, living or dying, from thee I will not hide what thoughts in my unquiet breast are risen, tending to some relief of our extremes, or end, though sharp and sad, yet tolerable, as in our evils, and of easier choice, if care of our decence perplexed us most, which must be borne to certain woe, devoured by death at last, and miserable it is, to be to others cause of misery, our own begotten, and our own loins, to bring into this cursed world a woeful race. That after wretched life must be at last food for so foul a monster, in thy power it lies, yet ere conception to prevent, the race unblessed, to being yet unbegot. Childless thou art, childless remain, so death shall be deceived his glut, and with us too be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. But if thou judge it hard and difficult, conversing, looking, loving, to abstain from love's due rites, nuptial embraces sweet, and with desire to languish without hope, before the present object languishing, with like desire, which would be misery and torment, less than none of what we dread. Then, both ourselves and seed at once to free from what we fear for both, let us make short, let us seek death, or, he not found, supply with our own hands his office on ourselves. Why stand we longer shivering under fears that show no end but death, and have the power of many ways to die, the shortest choosing, destruction with destruction to destroy? She ended here, or vehement despair broke off the rest, so much of death her thoughts had entertained, as dyed her cheeks with pale. But Adam, with such counsel nothing swayed, to better hopes his more attentive mind labouring had raised, and thus to Eve replied, Eve, thy contempt of life and pleasure seems to argue in thee something more sublime and excellent than what thy mind contemns, but self-destruction therefore sought refutes that excellence thought in thee, and implies not thy contempt, but anguish and regret for loss of life and pleasure overloved. Or if thou covet death as utmost end of misery, so thinking to evade the penalty pronounced, doubt not but God hath wisely armed his vengeful ire, than so to be forestalled. Much more I fear lest death, so snatched, will not exempt us from the pain we are by doom to pay. Rather, such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live. Then let us seek some safer resolution, which methinks I have in view, calling to mind with heed part of our sentence, that thy seed shall bruise the serpent's head, piteous amends, unless be meant, whom I conjecture, our grand foe, Satan, who in the serpent hath contrived against us this deceit, to crush his head, would be revenge indeed, which will be lost by death, brought on ourselves, or childless days resolved, as thou proposest, so our foe shall scape his punishment ordained, and we, instead, shall double ours upon our heads. No more be mentioned then of violence against ourselves and wilful barrenness that cuts us off from hope, and savours only rancour and pride, impatience and despite, reluctance against God and his just yoke laid on our necks. Remember with what mild and gracious temper he both heard and judged. Without wrath or reviling, we expected immediate dissolution, which we thought was meant by death that day, when, lo, to thee pains only in childbearing were foretold, and bringing forth, soon recompensed with joy, fruit of thy womb. On me, the curse aslope, glanced on the ground. With labour I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse. My labour will sustain me, and lest cold or heat should injure us, his timely care hath unbesought provided, and his hands clothed us unworthy, pitying while he judged. How much more, if we pray him, will his ear be open, and his heart to pity incline, and teach us further by what means to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow, which now the sky with various face begins to show us in this mountain, while the winds blow moist and keen, shattering the graceful locks of these fair spreading trees, which bids us seek some better shroud, some better warmth to cherish our limbs benumbed. Ere this diurnal star leave cold the night, how we his gathered beams reflected may with matter sear ferment, or by collision of two bodies grind the air attrite to fire, as late the clouds justling, or pushed with winds rude in their shock, tine the slant lightning, whose thwart flame driven down kindles the gummy bark of fir or pine, and sends a comfortable heat from far, which might supply the sun. Such fire to use, and what may else be remedy or cure to evils which our own misdeeds have wrought? He will instruct us praying, and of grace beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, sustained by him with many comforts, till we end in dust our final rest and native home. What better can we do than to the place repairing where he judged us, prostrate fall before him reverent, and there confess humbly our faults, and pardon beg with tears watering the ground, and with our sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. Undoubtedly he will relent and turn from his displeasure, in whose look serene, when angry most he seemed, and most severe, what else but favour, grace, and mercy shone? So spake our father penitent, nor Eve felt less remorse. They, forthwith to the place repairing where he judged them, prostrate fell before him reverent, and both confessed humbly their faults, and pardon begged, with tears watering the ground, and with their sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. Book 11. Thus they in lowliest plight, repentant stood, praying. For from the mercy seat above, prevenient grace, descending, had removed the stony from their hearts, and made new flesh regenerate grow instead, that sighs now breathed unutterable, which the spirit of prayer inspired, and winged for heaven with speedier flight than loudest oratory. Yet their port not of mean suitors, nor important less seemed their petition, than when the ancient pair in fables old, less ancient yet than these, Deucalion and chaste Pyrrha, to restore the race of mankind drowned, before the shrine of Themis stood devout. To heaven their prayers flew up, nor missed the way, by envious winds blown vagabond or frustrate. In they passed dimensionless through heavenly doors, then clad with incense where the golden altar fumed, by their great intercessor came in sight before the Father's throne. Them the glad Son presenting, thus to intercede began. See, Father, what first fruits on earth are sprung from thy implanted grace of man. These sighs and prayers, which in this golden censer, mixed with incense, I thy priest before thee bring, fruits of more pleasing savour from thy seed sown with contrition in his heart, than those which, his own hand manuring, all the trees of paradise could have produced, ere fallen from innocence. Now, therefore, bend thine ear to supplication, hear his sighs, though mute. Unskillful with what words to pray, let me interpret for him, me, his advocate, and propitiation all his works on me. Good or not good, in graft my merit those shall perfect, and for these my death shall pay. Accept me, and in me, from these receive the smell of peace toward mankind. Let him live before thee reconciled, at least his days numbered, though sad, till death his doom, which I to mitigate thus plead, not to reverse, to better life shall yield him, where with me all my redeemed may dwell in joy and bliss, made one with me as I with thee am one. To whom the Father, without cloud, serene, all thy request for man, accepted Son, obtain. All thy request was my decree, but longer in that paradise to dwell, the law I gave to nature him forbids, those pure immortal elements that know no gross, no unharmonious mixture foul, eject him, tainted now, and purge him off, as a distemper gross to air as gross, and mortal food, as may dispose him best for dissolution wrought by sin, that first distempered all things, and of incorrupt corrupted. I, at first, with two fair gifts created him endowed with happiness and immortality that fondly lost. This other served but to eternize woe, till I provided death. So death becomes his final remedy, and afterlife, tried in sharp tribulation and refined by faith and faithful works, to second life, waked in the renovation of the just, resigns him up with heaven and earth renewed. But let us call to synod all the blessed, through heaven's wide bounds. From them I will not hide my judgments, how with mankind I proceed, as how with peccant angels late they saw, and in their state, though firm, stood more confirmed. He ended, and the sun gave signal high to the bright minister that watched. He blew his trumpet, heard in Oreb, since perhaps when God descended, and perhaps once more to sound at general doom. The angelic blast filled all the regions, from their blissful bowers of amaranthine shade, fountain or spring, by the waters of life, wherever they sat in fellowships of joy, the sons of light hasted, resorting to the summons high, and took their seats, till, from his throne supreme, the Almighty thus pronounced his sovereign will. O sons, like one of us man is become, to know both good and evil, since his taste of that defended fruit, but let him boast his knowledge of good lost, and evil got. Happier had it sufficed him to have known good by itself, and evil not at all. He sorrows now, repents, and prays contrite. My motions in him, longer than they move, his heart I know how variable and vain, self-left. Lest therefore his now bolder hand reach also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever, dream at least to live forever. To remove him I decree, and send him from the garden forth to till the ground, whence he was taken, fitter soil. Michael, this my behest have thou in charge. Take to thee from among the cherubim thy choice of flaming warriors, lest the fiend, or in behalf of man, or to invade vacant possession, some new trouble raise. Haste thee, and from the paradise of God, without remorse, drive out the sinful pair. From hallowed ground the unholy, and denounce to them, and to their progeny, from thence perpetual banishment. Yet, lest they faint, at the sad sentence rigorously urged, for I behold them softened, and with tears bewailing their excess, all terror hide. If patiently thy bidding they obey, dismiss them not disconsolate, reveal to Adam what shall come in future days, as I shall thee enlighten, intermix my covenant in the woman's seed renewed, so send them forth, though sorrowing, yet in peace, and on the east side of the garden place, where entrance up from Eden easiest climbs, cherubic watch, and of a sword, the flame wide waving, all approach far off to fright, and guard all passage to the tree of life, lest paradise a receptacle prove to spirits foul, and all my trees their prey, with whose stolen fruit man once more to delude. He ceased, and the archangel power prepared for swift descent, with him the cohorts bright of watchful cherubim, 4 faces each had, like a double Janus, all their shape spangled with eyes, more numerous than those of Argus, and more wakeful than to drowse, charmed with Arcadian pipe, the pastoral reed of Hermes, or his opiate rod. Meanwhile, to resalute the world with sacred light, Leucothea waked and with fresh dews embalmed. The earth, when Adam and first matron Eve had ended now their orisons and found strength added from above, new hope to spring out of despair, joy, but with fear yet linked, which thus to Eve his welcome words renewed. Eve, easily my faith admit that all the good which we enjoy from heaven descends, but that from us aught should ascend to heaven, so prevalent as to concern the mind of God high blessed, or to incline his will, hard to belief may seem, yet this will prayer, or one short sigh of human breath, upborne even to the seat of God. For since I sought by prayer the offended deity to appease, kneeled and before him humbled all my heart, methought I saw him, placable and mild. Bending his ear, persuasion in me grew that I was heard with favour. Peace returned home to my breast, and to my memory his promise that thy seed shall bruise our foe, which, when not minded in dismay, yet now assures me that the bitterness of death is past, and we shall live. Whence hail to thee, Eve, rightly called, mother of all mankind, mother of all things living, since by thee man is to live, and all things live for man. To whom thus Eve, with sad demeanour meek, ill-worthy I such title should belong, to me transgressor, who, for thee ordained a help, became thy snare, to me reproach rather belongs, distrust, and all dispraise, but infinite in pardon was my judge, that I, who first brought death on all, am graced, the source of life. Next favourable thou, who highly thus to entitle me vouchsafest, far other name deserving. But the field to labour calls us, now with sweet imposed, though after sleepless night, for see, the morn, all unconcerned with our unrest, begins her rosy progress smiling. Let us forth, I never from thy side henceforth to stray, wherever our day's work lies, though now enjoined laborious, till day droop, while here we dwell. What can be toilsome in these pleasant walks? Here let us live, though in fallen state content. So spake, so wished much humbled Eve, but fate subscribed not. Nature first gave signs, impressed on bird, beast, air suddenly eclipsed. After short blush of morn, nigh in her sight the bird of Jove stooped from his airy tour. 2 birds of gayest plume before him drove, down from a hill the beast that reigns in fields. First hunter then pursued a gentle brace, goodliest of all the forest, hart and hind. Direct to the eastern gate was bent their flight. Adam observed, and with his eye the chase pursuing, not unmoved, to Eve thus spake. O Eve, some further change awaits us nigh, which heaven, by these mute signs in nature, shows forerunners of his purpose, or to warn us, haply to secure, of our discharge from penalty, because from death released some days, how long, and what till then our life, who knows? Or, more than this, that we are dust, and thither must return, and be no more? Why else this double object in our sight of flight pursued in the air, and over the ground, one way the self-same hour. Why in the east darkness, ere day's mid-course and morning light, more orient in yon western cloud that draws over the blue firmament a radiant white, and slow descends with something heavenly fraught. He erred not, for by this the heavenly bands down from a sky of jasper lighted now in paradise, and on a hill made halt, a glorious apparition, had not doubt and carnal fear that day dimmed Adam's eye, not that more glorious when the angels met Jacob in Mahanaim, where he saw the field pavilioned with his guardians bright, nor that which on the flaming mount appeared in Dothan covered with a camp of fire against the Syrian king, who, to surprise one man, assassin-like, had levied war unproclaimed. The princely hierarch in their bright stand there left his powers to seize possession of the garden. He alone, to find where Adam sheltered, took his way, not unperceived of Adam, who to Eve, while the great visitant approached, thus spake. Eve, now expect great tidings which perhaps of us will soon determine or impose new laws to be observed. For I descry, from yonder blazing cloud that veils the hill, one of the heavenly host, and by his gate, none of the meanest, some great potentate, or of the thrones above, such majesty invests him coming. Yet not terrible, that I should fear, nor sociably mild, as Raphael, that I should much confide, but solemn and sublime, whom, not to offend, with reverence I must meet, and thou retire. He ended, and the archangel soon drew nigh, not in his shape celestial, but as man clad to meet man, over his lucid arms, a military vest of purple flowed, livelier than Meliboean or the grain of Sarah, worn by kings and heroes old in time of truce. Iris had dipped the woof. His starry helm unbuckled showed him prime in manhood, where youth ended by his side, as in a glistering zodiac hung the sword, Satan's dire dread, and in his hand the spear. Adam bowed low, he kingly from his state inclined not, but his coming thus declared. Adam, heaven's high behest no preface needs, sufficient that thy prayers are heard, and death, then due by sentence, when thou didst transgress, defeated of his seizure many days, given thee of grace, wherein thou mayest repent, and one bad act with many deeds well done mayest cover. Well may then thy Lord, appeased, redeem thee quite from death's rapacious claim. But longer in this paradise to dwell permit not, to remove thee I am come, and send thee from the garden forth to till the ground, whence thou wast taken, fitter soil. He added not, for Adam at the news, heart struck with chilling gripe of sorrow stood, that all his senses bound. Eve, who unseen yet all had heard, with audible lament discovered soon the place of her retire. O unexpected stroke, worse than of death! Must I thus leave thee paradise? Thus leave thee native soil? These happy walks and shades, fit haunt of gods? Where I had hoped to spend quiet, though sad, and respite of that day that must be mortal to us both. O flowers, that never will in other climates grow, my early visitation and my last at even, which I bred up with tender hand from the first opening bud, and gave ye names, who now shall rear ye to the sun, or rank your tribes, and water from ambrosial fount. The lastly nuptial bower, by me adorned with what to sight or smell was sweet. From thee how shall I part, and whither wander down into a lower world? To this obscure and wild, how shall we breathe in other air, less pure, accustomed to immortal fruits? Whom thus the angel interrupted mild. Lament not, Eve, but patiently resign what justly thou hast lost, nor set thy heart thus overfond on that which is not thine. Thy going is not lonely, with thee goes thy husband, whom to follow thou art bound. Where he abides, think there thy native soil. Adam by this from the cold sudden damp recovering, and his scattered spirits returned, to Michael thus his humble words addressed. Celestial, whether among the thrones or named of them the highest, for such of shape may seem prince above princes, gently hast thou told thy message, which might else in telling wound, and in performing end us. What besides of sorrow, and dejection, and despair, our frailty can sustain, thy tidings bring. Departure from this happy place, our sweet recess, and only consolation left, familiar to our eyes. All places else inhospitable appear, and desolate, nor knowing us, nor known, and if by prayer incessant I could hope to change the will of him who all things can, I would not cease to weary him with my assiduous cries. But prayer against his absolute decree no more avails than breathe against the wind, blown, stifling back on him that breathes it forth. Therefore, to his great bidding I submit. This most afflicts me, that departing hence, as from his face I shall be hid, deprived his blessed countenance. Here I could frequent with worship place by place, where he vouchsafed presence divine, and to my sons relate. On this mount he appeared, under this tree stood visible, among these pines his voice I heard. Here with him at this fountain talked. So many grateful waters I would rear of grassy turf, and pile up every stone of lustre from the brook, in memory or monument to ages, and thereon offer sweet-smelling gums and fruits and flowers, in yonder nether world where shall I seek his bright appearances or footstep trace. For though I fled him angry, yet recalled to life prolonged and promised race, I now gladly behold, though but his utmost skirts of glory, and far off his steps adore. To whom thus Michael with regard benign, Adam, thou knowest heaven his, and all the earth, not this rock only, his omnipresence fills land, sea, and air, and every kind that lives, fermented by his virtual power, and warmed, all the earth he gave thee to possess and rule. No despicable gift, surmise not then his presence to these narrow bounds, confined of paradise, or Eden. This had been, perhaps, thy capital seat, from whence had spread all generations, and had hither come from all the ends of the earth, to celebrate and reverence thee, their great progenitor. But this preeminence thou hast lost, brought down to dwell on even ground now with thy sons. Yet doubt not but in valley and in plain God is, as here, and will be found alike present, and of his presence many a sign still following thee, still compassing thee round with goodness and paternal love, his face express, and of his steps the track divine. Which that thou mayest believe and be confirmed ere thou from hence depart. Know, I am sent to show thee what shall come in future days to thee, and to thy offspring, good with bad, expect to hear supernal grace contending with sinfulness of men, thereby to learn true patience, and to temper joy with fear, and pious sorrow, equally inured by moderation either states to bear, prosperous or adverse. So shalt thou lead safest thy life, and best prepared endure thy mortal passage when it comes. Ascend this hill, let Eve, for I have drenched her eyes, here sleep below, while thou to foresight wakest, as once thou slepst, while she to life was formed. To whom thus Adam gratefully replied, Ascend, I follow thee, safe guide, the path thou leadest me, and to the land of heaven submit, however chastening, to the evil turn my obvious breast, arming to overcome by suffering, and earn rest from labour won, if so I may attain. So both ascend in the visions of God. It was a hill of paradise the highest, from whose top the hemisphere of earth in clearest ken stretched out to the amplest reach of prospect lay. Not higher that hill, nor wider looking round, whereon for different cause the tempter set our second Adam in the wilderness to show him all earth's kingdoms and their glory. His eye might there command wherever stood city of old or modern fame, the seat of mightiest empire from the destined walls of Cambalu, seat of Cathian Can and Samarcand by Oxus, Temir's throne, to Paquin of Sinian kings, and thence to Agra and Lahore of Great Mogul, down to the golden Chersonese, or where the Persian in Ecbatan sat, or since in Ispahan, or where the Russian Tsar in Moscow, or the Sultan in Byzance, Turkestan born, nor could his eye not ken the empire of Negus to his utmost port, Urkoko, and the less maritime kings, Mombasa and Quiloa and Melind, and Sofala, thought Ophir, to the realm of Congo and Angola farthest south, or thence from Niger flood to Atlas mount the kingdoms of Almanza, Fez and Suz, Morocco and Algiers, and Tremisen. On Europe thence, and where Rome was to sway the world in spirit, perhaps he also saw rich Mexico, the seat of Montezuma, and Cusco in Peru, the richer seat of Atabalpa, and yet unspoiled Guyana, whose great city Gerian sons call El Dorado. But to nobler sights Michael from Adam's eyes the film removed, which that false fruit that promised clearer sight had bred, then purged with Euphrasian rue the visual nerve, for he had much to see, and from the well of life 3 drops instilled. So deep the power of these ingredients pierced, even to the inmost seat of mental sight, that Adam, now enforced to close his eyes, sunk down, and all his spirits became entranced. But him the gentle angel by the hand soon raised, and his attention thus recalled. Adam, now ope thine eyes, and first behold the effects which thy original crime hath wrought in some to spring from thee, who never touched the accepted tree, nor with the snake conspired, nor sinned thy sin. Yet from that sin derive corruption, to bring forth more violent deeds. His eyes he opened, and beheld a field, part arable and tilth, whereon were sheaves new reaped, the other part sheep walks and folds, aye, the midst of an altar, as the landmark stood, rustic and of grassy sword. Thither, anon, a sweaty reaper from his tillage brought first fruits, the green ear and the yellow sheaf, uncold, and came to hand. A shepherd next, more meek, came with the firstlings of his flock, choicest and best, then sacrificing laid the inwards of their fat, with incense strode, on the cleft wood, and all due rites performed. His offering soon propitious, fire from heaven consumed with nimble glance and grateful steam, the others not, for his was not sincere, whereat he inly raged, and as they talked, smote him into the midriff with a stone that beat out life. He fell, and deadly pale groaned out his soul with gushing blood effused. Much at that sight was Adam in his heart dismayed, and thus in haste to the angel cried, O teacher, some great mischief hath befallen to that meek man, who well had sacrificed his piety thus, and pure devotion paid. To whom Michael thus he also moved replied, These two are brethren, Adam, and to come out of thy loins, the unjust, the just have slain. For envy that his brother's offering found from heaven acceptance, but the bloody fact will be avenged, and the other's faith approved. Lose no reward, though here thou see him die, rolling in dust and gore, to which I'll sire. Alas, both for the deed and for the cause, but have I now seen death? Is this the way I must return to native dust? O sight of terror, foul and ugly to behold, horrid to think, how horrible to feel. To whom thus Michael, Death thou hast seen in his first shape on man, but many shapes of death, and many are the ways that lead to his grim cave, all dismal, yet to sense more terrible at the entrance than within. Some, as thou sawest, by violent stroke shall die, by fire, blood, famine, by intemperance, more in meats and drinks, which on the earth shall bring diseases dire, of which a monstrous crew before thee shall appear, that shall mayest know what misery the inabstinence of Eve shall bring on men. Immediately a place before his eyes appeared, sad, noisome, dark, a lazar house it seemed, wherein were laid numbers of all diseased, all maladies of ghastly spasm, or racking torture, qualms of heart-sick agony, all feverish kinds, convulsions, epilepsies, fierce catarrhs, intestine stone and ulcer, colic pains, demoniac frenzy, moping melancholy and moonstruck madness, pining atrophy, marasmus and wide-wasting pestilence, dropsies and asthmas, and joint-racking rheums. Dire was the tossing, deep the groans, despair tended the sick busiest from couch to couch. And over them triumphant death his dart shook, but delayed to strike, though oft invoked with vows, as their chief good and final hope. Sight so deform, what heart of rock could long dry-eyed behold? Adam could not but wept. Though not of woman born, compassion quelled his best of man, and gave him up to tears a space, till firmer thoughts restrained excess, and scarce recovering words, his plaint renewed. O miserable mankind, to what fall degraded, to what wretched state reserved? Better end here unborn. Why is life given to be thus wrested from us? Rather, why obtruded on us thus, who, if we knew what we receive, would either not accept life offered, or soon beg to lay it down, glad to be so dismissed in peace? Can thus the image of God in man, created once so goodly and erect, though faulty since to such unsightly sufferings, be debased under inhuman pains? Why should not man, retaining still divine similitude in part, from such deformities be free, and, for his Maker's image sake, exempt? Their Maker's image, answered Michael, then forsook them, when themselves they vilified to serve ungoverned appetite, and took his image whom they served, a brutish vice, inductive mainly to the sin of Eve. Therefore so abject is their punishment, disfiguring not God's likeness, but their own, or if his likeness by themselves defaced, while they pervert pure nature's healthful rules, to loathsome sickness worthily, since they God's image did not reverence in themselves. I yield it just, said Adam, and submit. But is there yet no other way, besides these painful passages, how we may come to death and mix with our connatural dust? There is, said Michael, if thou well observe the rule of not too much, by temperance taught, in what thou eatest and drinkest, seeking from thence due nourishment, not gluttonous delight, till many years over thy head return. So mayest thou live till, like ripe fruit, thou drop into thy mother's lap, or be with ease gathered nor harshly plucked, for death mature. This is old age, but then thou must outlive thy youth, thy strength, thy beauty, which will change to withered, weak and grey. Thy senses then, obtuse, all taste of pleasure, must forego. And what thou hast, and for the air of youth, hopeful and cheerful, in thy blood will reign a melancholy damp of cold, and dry to weigh thy spirits down, and last consume the balm of life. To whom our ancestor, henceforth I fly not death, nor would prolong life much, bent rather how I may be quit, fairest and easiest, of this cumbrous charge, which I must keep till my appointed day of rendering up, and patiently attend my dissolution. Michael replied, Live well, how long or short permit to heaven, and now prepare thee for another sight. He looked, and saw a spacious plain whereon were tents of various hue. By some were herds of cattle grazing, others whence the sound of instruments that made melodious chime was heard, of harp and organ, and who moved their stops and chords was seen. His volant touch, instinct through all proportions, low and high, fled and pursued, transversed the resonant fugue. In other part stood one who, at the forge labouring, two massy clods of iron and brass had melted, whether found where casual fire had wasted woods on mountain or in vale, down to the veins of earth, thence gliding hot to some cave's mouth, or whether washed by stream from underground. The liquid ore he drained into fit moulds prepared, from which he formed first his own tools, then what might else be wrought fusil or graven in metal. After these, but on the hither side, a different sort from the high neighbouring hills which was their seat, down to the plain descended by their guise, just men they seemed, and all their study bent to worship God aright, and know his works, not hid, nor those things last, which might preserve freedom and peace to men. They on the plain long had not walked, when from the tents, behold, a bevy of fair women, richly gay in gems and wanton dress, and the harp they sung, soft amorous ditties, and in dance came on. The men, though grave, eyed them, and let their eyes rove without rein, till in the amorous net fast caught they liked, and each his liking chose, and now of love they treat, till the evening star, love's harbinger, appeared. Then all in heat they light the nuptial torch, and bid invoke Hymen. Then first to marriage rites invoked, with feast and music all the tents resound. Such happy interview and fair event of love and youth not lost, songs, garlands, flowers, and charming symphonies attached the heart of Adam, soon inclined to admit delight, the bent of nature which he thus expressed. True opener of mine eyes, prime angel blessed, much better seems this vision, and more hope of peaceful days portends, than those two past. Those were of hate and death, or pain much worse. Here nature seems fulfilled in all her ends. To whom thus Michael, Judge not what is best by pleasure, though to nature seeming meet, created, as thou art, to nobler end, holy and pure, conformity divine. Those tents thou sawest so pleasant were the tents of wickedness, wherein shall dwell his race, who slew his brother. Studious they appear, of arts that polish life, inventors rare, unmindful of their maker, though his spirit taught them but they his gifts acknowledge none. Yet they a beauteous offspring shall beget. For that fair female troop thou sawest, that seemed of goddesses so blithe, so smooth, so gay, yet empty of all good wherein consists woman's domestic honour and chief praise, bred only and completed to the taste of lustful appetence, to sing, to dance, to dress, and troll the tongue, and roll the eye, and these that sober race of men, whose lives religious titled them the sons of God, shall yield up all their virtue, all their fame, ignobly, to the trains and the smiles of these fair atheists, and now swim in joy, ere long to swim at large and laugh, for which the world ere long, a world of tears, must weep. To whom thus Adam, a short joy bereft, oh pity and shame that they, who to live well entered so fair, should turn aside to tread paths indirect, or in the midway faint. But still I see the tenor of man's woe holds on the same from woman to begin. From man's effeminate slackness it begins, said the angel, who should better hold his place by wisdom and superior gifts received. But now prepare thee for another scene. He looked and saw wide territory spread before him, towns and rural works between, cities of men with lofty gates and towers, concourse in arms, fierce faces threatening war, giants of mighty bone and bold emprise, part wield their arms, part curb the foaming steed, single or in array of battle ranged from horse and foot, nor idly mustering stood. One way a band select from forage drives a herd of beeves, fair oxen and fair kine, from a fat meadow ground or fleecy flock ewes and their bleating lambs, over the plain, their booty, scarce with life, the shepherds fly, but call in aid, which makes a bloody fray. With cruel tournament the squadrons join, where cattle pastured late, now scattered lies with carcasses, and arms the ensanguined field, deserted, others to a city strong lay siege, encamped by battery, scale, and mine, assaulting, others from the wall defend with dart and javelin stones and sulphurous fire, on each hand slaughter and gigantic deeds. In other part the sceptred heralds call to council in the city gates, anon grey-headed men and grave, with warriors mixed, assemble and harangues are heard, but soon, in factious opposition, till at last, of middle age one rising, eminent in wise deport, spake much of right and wrong, of justice or religion, truth and peace, and judgment from above, him old and young exploded, and had seized with violent hands. Had not a cloud descending snatched him thence unseen amid the throng, so violence proceeded and oppression and sword law through all the plain, and refuge none was found. Adam was all in tears, and to his guide lamenting turned full sad. Oh, what are these death's ministers, not men, who thus deal death inhumanly to men, and multiply 10,000-fold the sin of him who slew his brother, and of whom such massacre make they, but of their brethren, men of men, but who was that just man, who, had not heaven rescued, had in his righteousness been lost? To whom thus Michael, these are the product of those ill-mated marriages thou sawest, where good and bad were matched, who of themselves abhor to join, and by imprudence mixed, produce prodigious births of body or mind. Such were these giants, men of high renown, for in those days might only shall be admired, and valour and heroic virtue called, to overcome in battle and subdue nations, and bring home spoils with infinite manslaughter, shall be held the highest pitch of human glory, and for glory done of triumph, to be styled great conquerors, patrons of mankind, gods and sons of gods, destroyers rightly called, and plagues of men. Thus fame shall be achieved, renown on earth, and what most merits fame in silence hid. But he, the seventh from thee, whom thou beheldst, the only righteous in the world, perverse, and therefore hated, therefore so beset with foes for daring single to be just, and utter odious truth, that God would come to judge them with his saints, him the Most High wrapped in a balmy cloud, with winged steeds, did, as thou sawest, receive to walk with God, high in salvation and the climes of bliss, exempt from death, to show thee what reward awaits the good, the rest what punishment, which now direct thine eyes, and soon behold. He looked, and saw the face of things quite changed. The brazen throat of war had ceased to roar, and now was turned to jollity and game, to luxury and riot, feast and dance, marrying or prostituting, as befell, rape or adultery, where passing fair allured them, thence from cups to civil broils. At length a reverend sire among them came, and of their doings great dislike declared, and testified against their ways. He oft frequented their assemblies, where so met, triumphs and festivals, and to them preached conversion and repentance, and to souls in prison under judgments imminent. But all in vain, which when he saw, he ceased contending, and removed his tents far off. Then from the mountain hewing timber tall, began to build a vessel of huge bulk, measured by cubit, length and breadth and height, smeared round with pitch, and in the side a door contrived, and of provisions laid in large for man and beast, when lo, a wonder strange. Of every beast and bird and insect small came sevens and pairs, and entered in as taught their order, last the sire and his 3 sons, with their 4 wives, and God made fast the door. Meanwhile the south wind rose, and with black wings, wide hovering, all the clouds together drove from under heaven the hills to their supply vapour and exhalation, dusk and moist, sent up amain, and now the thickened sky like a dark ceiling stood. Down rushed the rain impetuous, and continued, till the earth no more was seen. The floating vessel swum uplifted, and secure, with beaked prow, rode tilting over the waves, all dwellings else flood overwhelmed. And them, with all their pomp, deep under water rolled, sea-covered sea, sea without shore, and in their palaces, where luxury late reigned, sea-monsters whelped and stabled of mankind, so numerous late, all left, in one small bottom, swum embarked. How didst thou grieve then, Adam, to behold the end of all thy offspring, end so sad, depopulation? Thee another flood of tears and sorrow a flood, thee also drowned, and sunk thee, as thy sons, till gently reared by the angel on thy feet, thou stoodest at last, thou comfortless. As when a father mourns his children, all in view destroyed at once, and scarce to the angel utters thus thy plaint. O visions ill foreseen, better had I lived ignorant of future, so had borne my part of evil only, each day's lot enough to bear those now that were dispensed the burden of many ages. On me light at once, by my foreknowledge gaining birth abortive to torment me ere their being with thoughts that they must be. Let no man seek henceforth to be foretold what shall befall him or his children, evil he may be sure, which neither his foreknowing can prevent. And he the future evil shall no less in apprehension than in substance feel, grievous to bear, but that care now is past. Man is not whom to warn. Those few escaped famine and anguish will at last consume. Wandering that watery desert, I had hope, when violence was ceased, and war on earth, all would have then gone well. Peace would have crowned with length of happy days the race of man. But I was far deceived, for now I see peace to corrupt no less than war to waste. How comes it thus unfolds celestial guide, and whether here the race of man will end? To whom thus Michael: those whom last thou sawest in triumph and luxurious wealth, are they first seen in acts of prowess eminent and great exploits, but of true virtue void, who, having spilt much blood and done much wast subduing nations and achieved thereby fame in the world, high titles and rich prey, small change their course to pleasure, ease and sloth, surfeit and lust, till wantonness and pride raise out of friendship hostile deeds in peace. The conquered also and enslaved by war shall, with their freedom lost, all virtue lose and fear of God, from whom their piety feigned in sharp contest of battle found no aid against invaders. Therefore, called in zeal, thenceforth shall practice how to live secure, worldly or dissolute, on what their lords shall leave them to enjoy. For the earth shall bear more than enough, that temperance may be tried. So all shall turn degenerate, all depraved, justice and temperance, truth and faith forgot. One man except, the only son of light, in a dark age, against example good, against allurement, custom, and a world offended, fearless of reproach and scorn, or violence. He of their wicked ways shall them astonish, and before them set the paths of righteousness, how much more safe and full of peace, denouncing wrath to come on their impenitence, and shall return of them derided, but of God observed. The one just man alive by his command shall build a wondrous ark, as thou beheldest, to save himself and household from amidst the world devote to universal wrack. No sooner he, with them of man and beast select for life, shall in the dark be lodged, and sheltered round, but all the cataracts of heaven set open on the earth shall pour rain day and night, all fountains of the deep broke up shall heave the ocean to usurp beyond all bounds, till inundation rise above the highest hills. Then shall this mount of paradise by might of waves be moved out of his place, pushed by the horned flood, with all his verdure spoiled and trees adrift, down the great river to the opening gulf, and there take root an island salt and bare, the haunt of seals and hawks and sea-mews clang. To teach thee that God attributes to place no sanctity, if none be thither brought by men, who there frequent or therein dwell. And now, what further shall ensue, behold. He looked and saw the ark harl on the flood, which now abated, for the clouds were fled, driven by a keen north wind that, blowing dry, wrinkled the face of deluge as decayed, and the clear sun, on his wide watery glass, gazed hot, and of the fresh wave largely drew, as after thirst, which made their flowing shrink from standing lake to tripping ebb, that stole with soft foot towards the deep, who now had stopped his sluices, as the heaven his windows shut. The ark no more now floats, but seems on the ground, fast on the top of some high mountain fixed, and now the tops of hills as rocks appear, with clamour thence the rapid currents drive, towards the retreating sea, their furious tide. Forthwith from out the dark a raven flies, and after him the surer messenger, a dove sent forth once and again to spy green tree or ground, whereon his foot may light. The second time returning in his bill, an olive leaf he brings, Pacific sign, anon dry ground appears, and from his ark the ancient sire descends, with all his train. Then with uplifted hands and eyes devout, grateful to heaven, over his head beholds a dewy cloud, and in the cloud a bow conspicuous, with 3 lifted colours gay, betokening peace from God, and covenant new. Whereat the heart of Adam, erst so sad, greatly rejoiced, and thus his joy broke forth. O thou, who future things canst represent as present, heavenly instructor, I revive at this last sight, assured that man shall live with all the creatures and their seed preserve. Far less I now lament for one whole world of wicked sons destroyed, than I rejoice for one man found so perfect and so just, that God vouchsafes to raise another world from him, and all his anger to forget. But say, what mean those coloured streaks in heaven distended, as the bow of God appeased? Or serve they as a flowery verge to bind the fluid skirts of that same watery cloud, lest it again dissolve and shower the earth? To whom the archangel, dexterously thou aimest, so willingly doth God remit his ire, though late repenting him of man depraved, grieved at his heart, when looking down he saw the whole earth filled with violence, and all flesh corrupting each their way. Yet those removed, such grace shall one just man find in his sight, that he relents not to blot out mankind, and makes a covenant never to destroy the earth again by flood, nor let the sea surpass his bounds, nor rain to drown the world. With man therein or beast, but when he brings over the earth a cloud, will therein set his triple-coloured bow, whereon to look, and call to mind his covenant. Day and night, seed time and harvest, heat and hoary frost, shall hold their course, till fire purge all things new, both heaven and earth, wherein the just shall dwell. Book 12. As one who in his journey baits at noon, though bent on speed, so here the archangel paused betwixt the world destroyed and world restored. If Adam aught perhaps might interpose, then, with transition sweet, new speech resumes. Thus thou hast seen one world begin and end, and man, as from a second stock, proceed. Much thou hast yet to see, but I perceive thy mortal sight to fail. Objects divine must needs impair and weary human sense. Henceforth, what is to come I will relate. Thou therefore give due audience and attend. This second source of men, while yet but few, and while the dread of judgment past remains, fresh in their minds, fearing the deity with some regard to what is just and right, shall lead their lives and multiply apace, labouring the soil and reaping plenteous crop, corn, wine, and oil, and from the herd or flock, oft sacrificing bullock, lamb, or kid, with large wine offerings poured, and sacred feast, shall spend their days in joy unblamed, and dwell long time in peace, by families and tribes, under paternal rule, till one shall rise of proud ambitious heart, who, not content with fair equality, fraternal state, will arrogate dominion undeserved over his brethren, and quite dispossess concord and law of nature from the earth. Hunting, and men not beasts, shall be his game, with war and hostile snare, such as refuse subjection to his empire, tyrannous. A mighty hunter thence he shall be styled before the Lord, as in despite of heaven, or from heaven claiming second sovereignty, and from rebellion shall derive his name. Though a rebellion others he accuse, he with a crew, whom like ambition joins with him or under him to tyrannize. Marching from Eden towards the west, shall find the plain wherein a black bituminous gurge boils out from underground, the mouth of hell, of brick, and of that stuff they cast to build a city and tower, whose top may reach to heaven, and get themselves a name, lest far dispersed in foreign lands their memory be lost, regardless whether good or evil fame. But God, who oft descends to visit men unseen, and through their habitations walks to mark their doings, them beholding soon, comes down to see their city, ere the tower obstruct heaven towers, and in derision sets upon their tongues a various spirit, to raise quite out their native language, and instead to sow a jangling noise of words unknown. Forthwith a hideous gabble rises loud among the builders, each to other calls, not understood, till hoarse and all in rage as mocked they storm. Great laughter was in heaven, and looking down to see the hubbub strange, and hear the din. Thus was the building left ridiculous, and the work confusion named. Whereto thus Adam, fatherly displeased, O execrable son, so to aspire above his brethren, to himself assuming authority usurped, from God not given. He gave us only over beast, fish, fowl, dominion absolute. That right we hold by his donation, but man over men he made not lord. Such title to himself reserving, human left from human free. But this usurper, his encroachment proud, stays not on man, to God his tower intends siege and defiance. Wretched man, what food will he convey up thither to sustain himself and his rash army, where thin air above the clouds will pine his entrails gross, and famish him of breath, if not of bread? To whom thus, Michael, justly thou abhorrest that son, who, on the quiet state of men, such trouble brought, affecting to subdue rational liberty, yet know withal, since thy original lapse, true liberty is lost, which always with right reason dwells twinned, and from her hath no individual being, reason in man obscured, or not obeyed, immediately inordinate desires and upstart passions catch the government from reason, and to servitude reduce man, till then free. Therefore, since he permits within himself unworthy powers to reign over free reason, God, in judgment just, subjects him from without to violent lords, who oft as undeservedly enthrall his outward freedom. Tyranny must be, though to the tyrant thereby no excuse. Yet sometimes nations will decline so low from virtue, which is reason, that no wrong but justice and some fatal curse annexed deprives them from their outward liberty, their inward lost. Witness to irreverent son of him who built the ark, who, for the shame done to his father, heard his heavy curse, servant of servants on his vicious race. Thus will this latter, as the former world, still tend from bad to worse, till God at last, wearied with their iniquities, withdraw his presence from among them, and avert his holy eyes, resolving from thenceforth to leave them to their own polluted ways, and one peculiar nation to select from all the rest, of whom to be invoked, a nation from one faithful man, to spring him on this side Euphrates, yet residing, bred up in idol worship. Oh, that men, canst thou believe, should be so stupid grown, while yet the patriarch lived, who scaped the flood, as to forsake the living God, and fall to worship their own work in wood and stone for gods. Yet him God the Most High vouchsafes to call by vision from his father's house, his kindred, and false gods, into a land which he will show him, and from him will raise a mighty nation, and upon him shower his benediction. So that in his seed all nations shall be blessed. He straight obeys, not knowing to what land, yet firm believes. I see him, but thou canst not. With what faith he leaves his gods, his friends, and native soil. Of Chaldea, passing now the Lord to Haran, after him a cumbrous train of herds and flocks and numerous servitude, not wandering poor, but trusting all his wealth with God, and called him in a land unknown. Canaan he now attains, I see his tents, pitched about Shechem, and the neighbouring plain of Moreh. There by promise he receives gift to his progeny of all that land, from Hamath northward to the desert south. Things by their names I call, though yet unnamed. From Hermon east to the great western sea, Mount Hermon, yonder sea, each place behold in prospect, as I point them on the shore. Mount Carmel, here, the double-founted stream, Jordan, true limit eastward, but his son shall dwell to Senir, that long ridge of hills. This ponder, that all nations of the earth shall in his seed be blessed. By that seed is meant thy great deliverer, who shall bruise the serpent's head, whereof to thee anon plainlier shall be revealed. This patriarch blessed, whom faithful Abraham due time shall call a son, and of his son a grandchild, leaves like him in faith, in wisdom, and renown. The grandchild, with 12 sons increased, departs from Canaan to a land hereafter called Egypt, divided by the river Nile. See where it flows, disgorging at 7 mouths into the sea. To sojourn in that land he comes, invited by a younger son in time of dearth, a son whose worthy deeds raise him to be the second in that realm of Pharaoh. There he dies and leaves his race growing into a nation, and now grown suspected to a sequent king who seeks to stop their overgrowth, as inmate guests too numerous, whence of guests he makes them slaves inhospitably, and kills their infant males, till by 2 brethren, these 2 brethren call Moses and Aaron, sent from God to claim his people from enthrallment. They return with glory and spoil back to their promised land, but first the lawless tyrant who denies to know their God or message to regard must be compelled by signs and judgments dire. To blood unshed the rivers must be turned. Frogs, lice, and flies must all his palace fill with loathed intrusion, and fill all the land. His cattle must of rot and murrain die. Botches and blains must all his flesh emboss, and all his people, thunder mixed with hail, hail mixed with fire, must send the Egyptian sky, and wheel on the earth, devouring where it rolls. What it devours not, herb or fruit or grain, a darksome cloud of locusts swarming down must eat, and on the ground leave nothing green. Darkness must overshadow all his bounds, palpable darkness, and blot out 3 days. Last, with one midnight stroke, all the firstborn of Egypt must lie dead. Thus with 10 wounds the river dragon tamed at length submits, to let his sojourners depart, and oft humbles his stubborn heart, but still as ice, more hardened after thaw, till in his rage, pursuing whom he late dismissed, the sea swallows him with his host, but them lets pass, as on dry land between 2 crystal walls, awed by the rod of Moses, so to stand divided, till his rescued gain their shore. Such wondrous power God and his saint will lend, though present in his angel, who shall go before them in a cloud and pillar of fire, by day a cloud, by night a pillar of fire, to guide them in their journey and remove behind them, while the obdurate king pursues. All night he will pursue, but his approach darkness defends between till morning watch. Then through the fiery pillar and the cloud God looking forth will trouble all his host, and craze their chariot wheels, when by command Moses once more his potent rod extends over the sea his rod obeys. On their embattled ranks the waves return, and overwhelm their war. The race elect safe toward Canaan from the sure advance through the wild desert, not the readiest way, lest entering on the Canaanite alarmed, war terrify them inexpert, and fear return them back to Egypt, choosing rather inglorious life with servitude, for life to noble and ignoble is more sweet untrained in arms, where rashness leads not on. This also shall they gain by their delay in the wide wilderness. There they shall found their government, and their great senate choose, through the 12 tribes to rule by laws ordained, God from the mount of Sinai, whose grey top shall tremble, he descending will himself in thunder, lightning and loud trumpet sound, ordain them laws, part such as appertain to civil justice, part religious rites of sacrifice, informing them by types and shadows of that destined seed to bruise the serpent, by what means he shall achieve mankind's deliverance. But the voice of God to mortal ear is dreadful. They beseech that Moses might report to them his will, and terror cease. He grants what they besought, instructed that to God is no access without mediator, whose high office now Moses in figure bears, to introduce one greater, of whose day he shall foretell, and all the prophets in their age the times of great Messiah shall sing. Thus, laws and rights established, such delight hath God in men, obedient to his will, that he vouchsafes among them to set up his tabernacle, the Holy One with mortal men to dwell. By his prescript a sanctuary is framed of cedar, overlaid with gold, therein an ark, and in the ark his testimony. The records of his covenant over these a mercy seat of gold, between the wings of 2 bright cherubim, before him burn 7 lamps as in a zodiac, representing the heavenly fires. Over the tent of cloud shall rest by day, a fiery gleam by night, save when they journey, and at length they come, conducted by his angel, to the land promised to Abraham and his seed. The rest were long to tell, how many battles fought, how many kings destroyed and kingdoms won, or how the sun shall in mid-heaven stand still, a day entire, and night's due course adjourn. Man's voice commanding, sun in Gibeon stand, and thou moon in the vale of Elon, till Israel overcome. So call the third from Abraham, son of Isaac, and from him his whole descent, who thus shall Canaan win. Here Adam interposed, O sent from heaven, enlighter of my darkness, gracious things thou hast revealed, those chiefly which concern just Abraham and his seed. Now first I find mine eyes true opening, and my heart much eased, erewhile perplexed with thoughts what would become of me, and all mankind. But now I see his day, in whom all nations shall be blessed, favour unmerited by me, who sought forbidden knowledge by forbidden means. This yet I apprehend not, why to those among whom God will deign to dwell on earth, so many and so various laws are given, so many laws argue so many sins among them. How can God with such reside? To whom thus, Michael, doubt not but that sin will reign among them, as of thee begot, and therefore was law given them, to evince their natural pravity, by stirring up sin against law to fight, that when they see law can discover sin, but not remove, save by those shadowy expiations weak, the blood of bulls and goats, they may conclude some blood more precious must be paid for man, just for unjust, that in such righteousness to them by faith imputed, they may find justification towards God and peace of conscience which the law by ceremonies cannot appease, nor man the mortal parts perform, and not performing cannot live. So law appears imperfect, and but given with purpose to resign them in full time up to a better covenant, disciplined from shadowy types to truth, from flesh to spirit, from imposition to strict laws to free acceptance of large grace, from servile fear to filial works of law to works of faith. And therefore shall not Moses, though of God highly beloved, being but the minister of law, his people into Canaan lead. But Joshua, whom the Gentiles Jesus call, his name and office bearing, who shall quell the adversary serpent and bring back through the world's wilderness long wandered man, safe to eternal paradise of rest. Meanwhile they, in their earthly Canaan placed, long time shall dwell and prosper. But when sins national interrupt their public peace, provoking God to raise them enemies, from whom as oft he saves them penitent by judges first, then under kings, of whom the second, both for piety renowned and puissant deeds, a promise shall receive irrevocable, that his regal throne forever shall endure. The like shall sing all prophecy, that of the royal stock of David, so I name this king, shall rise a son, the woman's seed, to thee foretold to Abraham, as in whom shall trust all nations, and to kings foretold of kings the last, for of his reign shall be no end. But first a long succession must ensue, and his next son, for wealth and wisdom famed, the clouded ark of God, till then intense wondering shall in the glorious temple enshrine. Such follow him as shall be registered part good, part bad, of bad the longer scroll, whose foul idolatries and other faults heaped to the popular sum will so incense God as to leave them and expose their land, their city, his temple, and his holy ark, with all his sacred things, a scorn and prey to that proud city, whose high walls thou sawest, left in confusion, Babylon thence called. There in captivity he lets them dwell the space of 70 years, then brings them back, remembering mercy and his covenant sworn to David, stablished as the days of heaven, returned from Babylon by leave of kings, their lords, whom God disposed, the house of God they first re-edify, and for a while in mean estate live moderate, till, grown in wealth and multitude, factious they grow. But first among the priests dissension springs, men who attend the altar and should most endeavour peace. Their strife pollution brings upon the temple itself. At last they seize the sceptre and regard not David's sons, then lose it to a stranger, that the true anointed king Messiah might be born bared of his right. Yet at his birth a star, unseen before in heaven, proclaims him come, and guides the eastern sages, who inquire his place, to offer incense, myrrh, and gold. His place of birth a solemn angel tells to simple shepherds, keeping watch by night. They gladly thither haste, and by a choir of squadroned angels hear his carol sung. A virgin is his mother, but his sire the power of the Most High. He shall ascend the throne hereditary, and bound his reign with earth's wide bounds, his glory with the heavens. He ceased, discerning Adam with such joy surcharged as had like grief been dewed in tears, without the vent of words, which these he breathed. O prophet of glad tidings, finisher of utmost hope, now clear I understand what of my steadiest thoughts have searched in vain, why our great expectation should be called the seed of woman, virgin mother, hail, high in the love of heaven, yet from my loins thou shalt proceed, and from thy womb the Son of God Most High, so God with man unites. Needs must the serpent now his capital bruise expect with mortal pain, say where and when their fight and stroke shall bruise the victor's heel. To whom thus Michael, dream not of their fight, as of a duel or the local wounds of head or heel. Not therefore joins the Son manhood to Godhead, with more strength to foil thy enemy, nor so is overcome Satan, whose fall from heaven, a deadlier bruise disabled, not to give thee thy death's wound, which he, who comes thy Saviour, shall recure. Not by destroying Satan, but his works in thee, and in thy seed, nor can this be, but by fulfilling that which thou didst want, obedience to the law of God, imposed on penalty of death, and suffering death, the penalty to thy transgression due. And due to theirs which out of thine will grow, so only can high justice rest apaid. The law of God exact he shall fulfill both by obedience and by love, though love alone fulfill the law. Thy punishment he shall endure, by coming in the flesh to a reproachful life and cursed death, proclaiming life to all who shall believe in his redemption, and that his obedience imputed becomes theirs by faith, his merits to save them, not their own, though legal, works. For this he shall live hated, be blasphemed, seized on by force, judged, and to death condemned, shameful and accursed, nailed to the cross, by his own nation, slain for bringing life, but to the cross he nails thy enemies. The law that is against thee, and the sins of all mankind with him there crucified, never to hurt them more, who rightly trust in this his satisfaction. So he dies, but soon revives. Death over him no power shall long usurp, ere the third dawning light return. The stars of morn shall see him rise out of his grave, fresh as the dawning light, thy ransom paid, which man from death redeems, his death for man, as many as offered life. Neglect not, and the benefit embrace, by faith not void of works, this godlike act annuls thy doom. The death thou shouldest died, in sin forever lost from life. This act shall bruise the head of Satan, crush his strength, defeating sin and death, his two main arms, and fix far deeper in his head their stings than temporal death shall bruise the victor's heel. Or theirs whom he redeems a death like sleep, a gentle wafting to immortal life, nor after resurrection shall he stay longer on earth than certain times to appear to his disciples, men who in his life still followed him. To them shall leave in charge to teach all nations what of him they learned and his salvation, them who shall believe, baptizing in the profluent stream, the sign of washing them from guilt of sin, to life pure, and in mind prepared, if so be full. For death, like that which the Redeemer died, all nations they shall teach. For from that day, not only to the sons of Abraham's loins salvation shall be preached, but to the sons of Abraham's faith, wherever through the world. So in his seed all nations shall be blessed. Then to the heaven of heavens he shall ascend with victory, triumphing through the air, over his foes and thine. There shall surprise the serpent, prince of air, and drag in chains through all his realm, and there confounded leave. Then enter into glory, and resume his seat at God's right hand, exalted high above all names in heaven. And thence shall come, when this world's dissolution shall be ripe, with glory and power, to judge both quick and dead, to judge the unfaithful dead, but to reward his faithful and receive them into bliss, whether in heaven or earth, for then the earth shall all be paradise, far happier place than this of Eden, and far happier days. So spake the Archangel Michael, then paused as at the world's great period, and our sire, replete with joy and wonder, thus replied, O goodness infinite, goodness immense, that all this good of evil shall produce, and evil turn to good, more wonderful than that which by creation first brought forth light out of darkness. Full of doubt I stand, whether I should repent me now of sin, by me done and occasioned, or rejoice much more, that much more good thereof shall spring. To God more glory, more goodwill, to men from God, and over wrath grace shall abound. But say, if our deliverer up to heaven must reascend, what will betide the few his faithful, left among the unfaithful herd, the enemies of truth? Who then shall guide his people who defend? Will they not deal worse with his followers than with him, they doubt? Be sure they will, said the angel, but from heaven he to his own a comforter will send, the promise of the Father, who shall dwell his Spirit within them, and the law of faith, working through love upon their hearts, shall write, to guide them in all truth, and also arm with spiritual armor, able to resist Satan's assaults and quench his fiery darts. What man can do against them, not afraid, though to the death, against such cruelties with inward consolations recompensed, and oft supported, so as shall amaze their proudest persecutors. For the Spirit poured first on the apostles, whom he sends to evangelize the nations. Then on all baptized shall them with wondrous gifts endue to speak all tongues, and do all miracles, as did their Lord before them. Thus they win great numbers of each nation to receive with joy the tidings brought from heaven. At length their ministry performed, and race well run, their doctrine and their story written left, they die, but in their room, as they forewarn, wolves shall succeed for teachers, grievous wolves, who all the sacred mysteries of heaven to their own vile advantages shall turn, of lucre and ambition, and the truth with superstitions and traditions taint, left only in those written records pure, though not but by the Spirit understood. Then shall they seek to avail themselves of names, places, and titles, and with these to join secular power, though feigning still to act by spiritual, to themselves appropriating the Spirit of God, promised alike and given to all believers, and from that pretense spiritual laws by carnal power shall force on every conscience laws which none shall find, left them enrolled, or what the Spirit within shall on the heart engrave. What will they then but force the Spirit of grace itself, and bind his consort liberty? What but unbuild his living temples, built by faith to stand, their own faith, not another's? For on earth, who against faith and conscience can be heard infallible? Yet many will presume, whence heavy persecution shall arise on all who in the worship persevere of spirit and truth. The rest, far greater part, will deem in outward rites and specious forms religion satisfied. Truth shall retire, be struck with slanderous darts, and works of faith rarely be found. So shall the world go on, to good malignant, to bad men benign, under her own weight groaning, till the day appear of respiration to the just, and vengeance to the wicked, at return of him so lately promised to thy aid, the woman's seed, obscurely then foretold, now ampler known thy Saviour and thy Lord, last in the clouds from heaven, to be revealed in glory of the Father, to dissolve Satan with his perverted world, then raise from the conflagrant mass, purged and refined, new heavens, new earth, ages of endless date, founded in righteousness and peace and love, to bring forth fruits, joy, and eternal bliss. He ended, And thus Adam last replied. How soon hath thy prediction, seer blessed, measured this transient world, the race of time till time stand fixed. Beyond is all abyss, eternity, whose end no eye can reach. Greatly instructed I shall hence depart, greatly in peace of thought, and have my fill of knowledge, what this vessel can contain, beyond which was my folly to aspire. Henceforth I learn that to obey is best, and love with fear the only God, to walk as in his presence, ever to observe his providence, and on him sole depend, merciful over all his works, with good still overcoming evil, and by small accomplishing great things, by things deemed weak, subverting worldly strong, and worldly wise by simply meek, that suffering for truth's sake is fortitude to highest victory, and to the faithful death the gate of life, taught this by his example, whom I now acknowledge my Redeemer, ever blessed. To whom thus also the angel last replied, This having learned, thou hast attained the sum of wisdom. Hope no higher, though all the stars thou knewest by name, and all the ethereal powers, all secrets of the deep, all nature's works, or works of God in heaven, air, earth, or sea, and all the riches of this world enjoyest, and all the rule, one empire. Only add these to thy knowledge answerable, add faith and virtue, patience, temperance, add love, by name to come called charity, the soul of all the rest. Then wilt thou not be loath to leave this paradise, but shalt possess a paradise within thee, happier far. Let us descend now, therefore, from this top of speculation, for the hour precise exacts our parting hence, and see the guards by me encamped on yonder hill, expect their motion, at whose front a flaming sword, in signal of remove, waves fiercely round. We may no longer stay, go, waken Eve, her also I with gentle dreams have calmed, portending good, and all her spirits composed to meek submission. Thou, at season fit, let her with thee partake what thou hast heard, chiefly what may concern her faith to know, the great deliverance by her seed to come, for by the woman's seed on all mankind, that ye may live, which will be many days, both in one faith unanimous, though sad, with cause for evils past, yet much more cheered with meditation on the happy end. He ended, and they both descend the hill. Descended Adam to the bower, where Eve lay sleeping, ran before, but found her waked, and thus, with words not said, she him received. Whence thou returnest, and whither wentest, I know, for God is also in sleep, and dreams advise, which he hath sent, propitious, some great good presaging, since with sorrow and heart's distress, wearied I fell asleep. But now, lead on, in me is no delay, with thee to go, is to stay here, without thee here to stay, is to go hence unwilling. Thou to me art all things under heaven, all places thou, who, for my unwilful crime, art banished hence. This further consolation yet secure I carry hence, though all by me is lost. Such favour I unworthy am vouchsafed by me, the promised seed shall all restore. So spake our mother Eve, and Adam heard well pleased, but answered not. For now, too nigh the archangel stood, and from the other hill to their fixed station, all in bright array the cherubim descended, on the ground gliding, meteorous, as evening mist risen from a river over the marish glides, and gathers ground fast at the labourer's heel, homeward returning. High in front advanced, the brandished sword of God before them blazed, fierce as a comet, which, with torrid heat and vapour as the Libyan air adust, began to parch that temperate clime, whereat in either hand the hastening angel caught our lingering parents, and to the eastern gate led them direct, and down the cliff as fast to the subjected plain, then disappeared. They, looking back, all the eastern side beheld of paradise, so late their happy seat, waved over by that flaming brand, the gate, with dreadful faces thronged, and fiery arms, some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and Providence their guide. They, hand in hand, with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. The end. This has been Paradise Lost by John Milton, narrated by Kusi.